You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 564, our breakdown of Night, the fifth episode of the Acolyte series. And holy bananas, this was a show to remember, a show to discuss, a show to break down. I don't know that I've ever been. I posted this almost immediately after watching the episode. I can't remember a time where I was as tense as I was throughout this episode, and I credit that to being vested in the characters, which I was going into the series, but then there was just something about the editing, something about the action sequences, the flipping back and forth between scenes, even though that usually doesn't resonate with me very well. There was something about it that worked for me in this episode in particular, but more on that here in just a second. We're going to get into all our initial impressions and all the great breakdown. And with me tonight, as always, is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
You know, I'm doing fantastic. I'm right there with you. I was actually like clenched. I didn't realize it at times. Like the fighting was intense. I don't know if you know this, Albert, but we like lightsabers a lot in Star Wars.
Yeah, shiny things always work for me. Honestly.
We do like shiny, glowy things that go spark and impale people. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, this was we'll get into opening commentary in a minute, but this was a lot of things that we had been wanting to see since 2005, I think.
Yeah,
and 2002, right? In different ways. But we finally kind of got it delivered here in a way that I think many of us had always been interested in. So this is going to be a fun one to break down, a lot to really dig into, and actually really excited to talk about what we're going to do for Patreon this week as well.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in just a bit. But before we go any further, get some
speaking of Patreon members, thank you to all of our Patreon members, all the people who have joined. We certainly appreciate it, especially our now part of the tribe members, Raphael, Danny, Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dad, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And then, of course, the Delusions Granger members, our top tier. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Daz. Thank you all so much. CantinaCast.com/Patreon. If you are curious about joining Patreon, we'd love to have you. This week, Albert had a great idea. We need to do a character spotlight on the one and only Chimere, the Sith Lord, if you want to believe Manny Jacinto himself. Or we'll talk a little bit about that. But we'll do a little bit of a dig into what we know about the character and I don't know about what this might mean for the rest of the series too. Just a really cool character now.
Yeah, I mean, we got some questions that we'll cover as well. So between now and this Sunday, Patreon members, anybody really, feel free to throw your questions out there. We'll answer those, and then we'll back end that show with a character breakdown, character dissection, if you will, on Chimere, because I think this episode honestly brought to light a number of things. It kind of gave us a resolution to what I think a lot of us felt like was the obvious. And having seen the performance, I'm not at all upset about it now. As I was I thought I was gonna be really disappointed, but there's so much more stuff that's intriguing now, and we're gonna break that all down, speculate to a better degree than we are tonight, just because of how much we need to cover tonight. But that's gonna be a lot of fun to actually do a character spotlight and really put him on the forefront of the discussion and talk about where we potentially could be seeing this character go and where he's come from. Like that's one of the more intriguing things is like, what is his background? What has he done? How did he get to this point, kind of thing? Also, hey, if you guys are watching on the live stream, thank you so much for coming out to, he's already grabbing the tinfoil hat there, but thanks for coming out to the live stream. You can always find us on cantinacast.com/YouTube. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and then obviously leave us comments down below. We'll even take, constructive criticism about us, about the show. That's all good. Just keep it honest, keep it clean, keep it respectful. And if you've got questions, throw those in there, because we are doing a Acolyte poster contest right now. So every episode, we'll take a question from the weeks previous, and we'll pick a random question person that presented a question, and we will award them a poster for the Acolyte. And Jonesy, I know you got, just before we came on air, you pulled the lucky name, and who was that?
I did, yeah. Drum roll, please. It is Mr. John Maloney. Send us an email. Thank you so much, John, for the questions. We featured it on the Q&A show this past weekend as well for Patreon. Howard's holding up your brand new poster. So reach out to, or we'll send you an email, and we'll get your information to make sure that we can get you the poster timely. and we'll get that in the mail soon. So thanks for leaving the questions again. Yeah, everyone, please do leave us a comment. Those are the easiest ones for us to find, but you can email us hello there at cantinacast.com. You can leave us something on social media. Albert's usually pretty good about grabbing those, and if you're on Patreon, certainly leave us there or in Discord too. We like having the conversation, and we were able to pull those from there pretty easily too. So we make sure we don't miss anybody, and we'll do another drawing for next week's episode breakdown as well.
Yep. And these are official posters. This is not something that Albert cranked on in his little HP printer sitting over here next to my computer. But
not this time, at least. Yeah.
not this time. All right. I think that's hey, just quick programming note. This Sunday, really the only show we've got is the Patreon show. So if you're a Patreon member, that'll be 9 p.m. Sunday night, 9 p.m. Central Sunday night. Again, we'll kick off that Chimera dissection as well as the Q&A. So, all right. Without further ado, why don't we get into this? I know I've heard a couple of things. I'm sure you got a full laundry list, I do at least, of additional opening thoughts, impressions, what worked well with you during this episode, and was there anything that you kind of walked away and were like, yeah, I could have, take it or leave it kind of thing?
Yeah, there were a couple things that I weren't maybe as much of a fan of. I've been sitting with one of them, and I'm changing my perspective on that one. But I think with the good things first is, and I know as Rollins is talking about it, you mentioned at the top of the show, they telegraphed who Chimera was going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you execute it well, this is like when you know spoilers. If you go into a show and you're okay with spoilers, if they do it well on screen, it doesn't take anything away from the experience, right? And I think when we told us what we're going to do, and they kind of did some misleading things at the beginning of the episode when some of the dialogue, right, it kind of made it seem like Coral was still on the menu, right, still kind of in it, like you don't recognize me, and things like that, and so they're still kind of messing with us, but at the end of the day, they delivered it, and it works just so well. The fight scene, I mean, we can't really say enough about the fight scene. It was brutal, which I know hasn't been always well received with some people, especially with so many Jedi. And quite honestly, I don't like being right about masked Jedi like slayings, but sometimes it happens. And like I had a feeling going up, like the days leading into this, I was like, I don't know how anybody except Soul survives this episode, and unfortunately, that was the case. I was wrong about the Sith dying in this episode, though, so I guess there's balance in that respect. But
yeah,
a lot of fun, man. Manny Jacinto, I tell you what, I mean, I liked the character, I liked what he was doing with it, but as this no-name, Sith Lord or whatever we're going to call him, or the Stranger, I guess is what they technically call him in the show. Absolutely dynamite. I don't. There's a lot of criticism about maybe some of the dialogue and what happened, but man, you talk about a sinister, really. I mean, the looks he did, the way that he was teasing and playing with the Jedi and challenging them, throwing things back, and the whole Jackie thing of when Soul was devastated at her. But we're doing spoilers, by the way. If you're new to the show, we're spoiling everything. There's no holds barred here. But then throwing it back in his face, like, you brought her here. Like, she was a child. Yeah, but you brought her here. So what'd you expect? You can't cast blame if you're not going to accept any yourself. And again, that dialogue just continues to build on itself of where we're going. A couple of things I wasn't as really keen about. I think the main one was I don't really care for the switcheroos, like with twins. But the more I sat with this one, I was like, okay, I think I can make sense of this, because what's going to happen, I think, is that we have May, who's maybe way far out and more extreme of how she feels about the Jedi. She's going to learn things from Soul, who would have been telling Osha that probably would have pushed her away. But for May, it might bring her back in off of that ledge, and a perspective that maybe she believes is far worse than what reality actually is. And then we're going to see Chimera giving more truths to Osha that she's not aware of that might be pushing her further away. So the switch and the dynamic here might actually work pretty well, and it might be more interesting. Whereas compared to my first response was, oh great, we're going to think this twin is that one and that one. And I don't typically care for that type of dynamic, but that was the only one I was really kind of worried about. But I kind of walked back from that ledge a little bit, and I'm encouraged about where it might be. I think the other thing was also, this is the trope. We had this last week. We had it earlier in the season of Soul saying, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to explain, and then he gets stunned. That stuff annoys me. It just does. It's just me. It's not Star Wars or this or particular. It's just annoying. Like, I'm going to tell you something, and then, no, we're not going to get it again for another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be. And I don't get enticed by that. I don't get excited about that. I get frustrated by that. So that was my only real complaint about the episode, was more in that regard. But the rest of it was really cool. I mean, Jackie Leon kicking ass was absolutely stellar. Daphne Keene, we knew that she was touting like these fights were going to be, prequel era, Phantom Menace and above, that type of thing. And wow, they delivered on that, I think, in spades.
Yeah.
But I'll kind of pause there. What about you?
Yeah, I'll pick up where you left off. I think, to be fair, she said that they were hoping that these would live up to, like, she acknowledged that those are, in their opinions, those were the greatest fight scenes ever, right? The Phantom Menace, Duel of Fates, and that they were hoping that this would kind of reach those levels. But I want to point that out because I've seen a lot of people say, oh, they said it was going to best that fight scene. They never ever said that. Go back and watch all the videos as much as you'd like. They never did say that. And credit to them. Like, the fighting sequences were freaking phenomenal. They were absolutely spectacular, beginning to end. A lot, very hard driven in terms of the action, the combat sequences, the choreography that went into it. You can tell, when we saw them coming into this show, all the behind the scenes stuff, they did talk a lot about how much they trained, how much they practiced and choreographed. And if you really were reading between the lines, you figured at some point we were going to get a pretty large action sequence, which is what this whole episode technically was. It was just one large 27-minute action sequence beginning to end. And some of the best, probably, no, it's not even probably, it is the best action sequences I think we've seen on television. I don't even know. I said Star Wars ascended, and I meant that in all its sincerest form that you could possibly take that as, because I do feel like the bar was raised in a lot of ways with this episode. I know I've been kind of critical, not necessarily critical, but the first two episodes I thought were great. The third one, I think I've already explained ad nauseum why that didn't sit with me so well. It wasn't really about the writing. It was more about how it was kind of put together. The fourth episode I thought was better, but this one just feels like above and beyond. And I think it needed to be, given where the fourth episode ended. It left us hanging and wanting so much more, and it delivered. I think there was a huge payoff in terms of that anxiety, the anticipation about what was going to happen in this episode. I credit a lot of that to Alex Garcia Lopez, the director of this episode. Again, I don't necessarily like hard cuts, and I don't like a lot of flipping back and forth and transitions. I think it can work well. Star Wars is known to do that. You're flipping between three battles kind of going on at one point. But when it becomes too excessive, sometimes that kind of throws me off because I want to stay with the characters. I want to stay with the emotion, and they pull away and they go back. The way this was done in this episode, I thought it worked pretty well. Like, I noticed it, but it didn't necessarily take me out of it. It didn't lessen the excitement or the joy or the anticipation, the anxiety that I was feeling. So I think they did a pretty noble job given everything that was going on. I would echo the brutality of this episode, like seeing some of the things that we saw from a Jedi's perspective and what they did. And this gave it the darker, edgier aspect that I think a lot of us were going in and kind of hoping for. Granted, it doesn't have like a high rating in terms of like teen or whatever. I think it's like a 14, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, usually. Yeah.
But still, I was expecting this because it was going to be told from the perspective. At least my thoughts would be it would be told from the perspective of the Sith, dark side. That it would kind of have a lot of this going on. And when you look at those first four episodes, it was implied, but not necessarily always shown. Here, we had to quote John Huey over at Versus broadcast. He said it was the Sith kebab, all right, where we got the two Jedi that were impaled, the snapping of the neck that you mentioned. It was just brutal stuff that we don't typically see. And there's two actually great articles, by the way, just to throw this out there right now on Entertainment Weekly. One is kind of focused around Kamir and Manny Jacinto's character, that sort of thing. And there's another one that's kind of focused on Yord, but there's a lot of the whole cast is chiming in, everybody from Headland to Amanda, everyone's chiming in. But they were really kind of talking about how when Headland was talking about this episode, she was saying, look, Anakin slaughtered a bunch of kids. And while that wasn't shown explicitly on television, that was still pretty brutal. So she's like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and just go for it here and see if anybody pulls back, if anyone says anything. And they didn't, which was great. It was just stuff that we had always wanted to see, like in live action, and haven't seen. So I think they pulled that off really well. Just a couple other things. I know we're going to talk a lot about Manny Jacinto. We're going to talk a lot about The Stranger, especially when we get to the Spotlight episode on Sunday. But that was just a great performance overall.
Yeah.
The reveal of his character. So I would agree. Like I said earlier on, I wasn't the biggest fan of him being the character, but only because it felt like it was very signaled. Two things. Number one, in that same article, Headland does talk about how that really wasn't the mystery. They were putting those seeds out there. They wanted people to suspect him. That's not what the real big mystery was. And I think we even said as much on the last Q&A show we said it started to feel like, okay, that's probably not the mystery. There's probably something more there. So that box got checked. I'm okay with it. But what I will say is, outside of the performance that we got from Annie Jacinto, what really got me is the actual reveal of seeing Jecky's body there and then slowly sliding off to the side, revealing him in that like iconic pose now that's going to be forever immortalized. And then slowly looking up and revealing his face. I mean, that was absolutely beautiful. I mean, it was just freaking stunning. It was just like the best reveal you could possibly think of, to use a poor Jecky's body as the cover up for it. So watch it again. It's just something spectacular. Well, certainly something to view.
The dialogue to follow all of that up, right? Of when he starts to talk about, I've revealed, like, you forced me to reveal my face. Now you all have to die. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Foreshadowing.
It's so matter of fact, right? I mean, it's already happened for the most part, except Solo. But it was absolutely perfect. And the delivery was just this really, gosh, I can't even find the words for it. It was just a sinister type of voice, matter of fact, and just absolutely perfectly delivered.
There was, so the last two things, we'll get into Cortosis and all that, of course, but
that was really cool to see on screen. Yeah.
There was something about this episode that felt like it was very steeped in Legends lore, but still present, still canonized in a lot of ways. And so there was a really happy balance, especially for those of us that have been around for any number of years, or anyone who's actually just been, even if you've taken to the Legends recently. I mean, if you're a Legends fan, there were so many things that you were looking at and seeing and hearing being discussed on screen that you're like, wow, that feels like Legends material. And here it is now being not only canonized, but on television, on live television. It wasn't a book. It wasn't animation, right? Not to take anything away from those, but it was like real people talking about this and stuff that's now been, I guess, officially cemented on live action. So that's going to open up all kinds of discussion down the road. And then the last thing I would say is this episode felt like it was kind of a reset of sorts, right? We're kind of at a point now where, we've gotten rid of a lot of the cast. So I've got questions about, like, who are we following at this point, right? It seems like it's going to be a very focused, hyper-focused kind of the last three episodes. The relationship between Sol and May, and the relationship between Osha and Kamir. We're probably going to be stay there. Of course, we still have Vernestra Rowe and what her role is going to be and all that. But from here on out, I mean, it is kind of a reset of sorts. We're now, again, hyper-focused, and we are kind of, the tail is going to churn. And again, going back to that EW article, we'll get to that a little bit later. But Leslie Headland does kind of talk about this, and so does Manny Jacinto. He talks about that last quote, which we'll get into as well later tonight. But that last quote, it does feel like we're being set up to kind of go in a totally different path. And so she said it before we went into this, like, what you expect this series to be is not going to be it. And I think we've seen very clear examples now, with the most recent being the very ending of this episode, where, it looks like we're going to diverge again, and it's not going to be the same. So super excited about the future holds, I guess, at this point for them.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Well, I'm tired of talking. No, I'm kidding.
You're just getting warmed up.
I'm just getting warmed up. All right. Well, let's get to, we start with immediately where we were hoping this is where it would start. I think, God, I was like, scared that we were going to suddenly flash back, or we'd have to wait another episode, which I never thought it would be happen, but people kept telling me, and I think they were just doing it to egg me on. But yeah, I think it's great that we at least kind of started there. What was surprising to me is that we weren't picking up, like, as the battle was going on immediately. It was kind of a slow lead in. I mean, I say slow, like a minute and 30 seconds before all hell broke loose at that point. Right. But I was expecting to kind of pick up right from that moment and not see Osha wake up. But nonetheless, she wakes up, she picks up Pip, and, you can, as the camera's kind of pulling back, you can see the ground cover, the trails.
That red pollen, they called it in the audio description.
Yeah, it was cool. All exposed where Kamir had used the Force to kind of push all the Jedi back. And you can kind of slightly, very, lo-fi hear the lightsaber still going on, but it did kind of immerse you in that, I'm really disoriented what just kind of happened. And I think we as the audience were feeling that as much as Osha was at that. And then from there on, though, it was like we jump right into Kamir versus 5 Jedi at one time.
My first response to this was, oh gosh, Osha's waking up again. Man, and then
this is wake up number 6 now, I think, in the series.
Yeah, it feels like a few now, right? But then she looks over at the Jedi, is like, oh snap, things got real fast. And that was a really great way of like really snapping you right back into the moment. And then you're right, that lucid, not quite, Lucidity's not quite returned to her quite yet, and getting the fading in of the lightsaber sounds in the
Yeah.
background. So you're like, you think you hear it, but you're not really sure. And then it starts to become more and more apparent. And then you get the stark eye-opening awakening that you have a dead Jedi looking back at you.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, okay, we're back. We're doing this. Let's get to work.
Yep. But we saw Yord. We saw Ithia Pan, which is the Keldor that we all thought at some point, like way back when we saw the trailer, we were thinking that was going to be
a female Keldor, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that really. Oh,
yes.
I never checked that. But and then there's like 3 red shirts, like 3 on. I think they have names. I think I saw them on IMDb. They actually have names, but I didn't write them down. But either way, they were fighting.
Dead Jedi 1, 2, then 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's how they were labeled. And then we hear, of course, Osha's told to run. This is where Kamir starts to approach Yord. He's kind of been cut on his leg at this point. And we said that stun gun was going to come into play. And man, it like got a lot of usage in this episode. I think they used it like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
But yeah, this is where Osha shoots him with the stun gun. And of course, this doesn't really have any effect on him because of the cortosis. So let's just pause here. I guess cortosis, I mean, it's always been a thing in canon, but it's official now that it's in use. We're actually seeing it in use on live action, live screen, or whatever. But I think the question that I have now, and I'm kind of half joking, is like, where the hell has it been this whole time? Like, I mean, it's if it's out there, I'm sure at some point they're going to explain all this. But I don't know. How were you excited to finally see it on screen?
It took me a second to figure out. I think I messaged you this. It took me a minute to figure out what was actually going on. I was like, what is he doing that's actually shorting these out? And then it finally clicked. I was like, oh, snap, we're seeing this. And for maybe those less familiar with cortosis is a special type of metal that you can actually short out temporarily lightsabers. And I won't go into, I don't know all of the reasons of how that's possible, but so he had cortosis as his gauntlet on his right arm, I believe it was, as well as his helmet. So that's why when he was hitting or smacking away and hitting with his head, that the lightsaber didn't cut through it because it's a really hard metal, much like Beskar. But then also it would actually short it out and disrupt the field, the energy there. And because you're like, why are they just kind of shaking it, thinking it'll come back?
Yeah.
And maybe the Jedi put 2 and 2 together about what it was. And they knew that would happen. But this was really cool to see. And that it was nice that it wasn't just another helmet, right? And I think some people are like, well, it's just another helmet. Why do the Sith do kind of weird helmets and stuff like that? In this case, it really seemed, and it was all scratched up, but you could tell it was reassembled and put back together. Why would they go through all of that? It's because it's a rarer metal, right? And you wouldn't necessarily have access to it. And I like that cortosis, why we haven't seen it, to your question, is I think it's just this, it's special, right? We don't have as much of it in the galaxy, or at least it's not by reputable people, and the Jedi may have stashed a lot of it away, much like what the Empire was doing with Beskar with the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
To try to take away this special metal that can actually be very disruptive to whatever plans you have. And so it makes sense that a Sith would have something to help combat Jedi, especially if you've got to go 1 on 5, 1 on many, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. I'm with you too. Like, I was shaking my head going, what is going on? At first I thought he had cut the lightsabers in half and they were just why are they not turning on?
Yeah, I thought he destroyed them. I was like, okay, well, this is going to end quick. But
right.
And then I realized they were actually shorting. I was like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool because they had a nice visual effect as well with the kind of like the smoke and the sparks that would fly every time they did that. But its best use, honestly, or I guess the best part of this cortosis, and I would call it a gimmick. It's not really a gimmick, but later on, not to steal anything away, but just I do want to talk about it. When Jackie is suddenly her lightsaber, her secondary lightsaber turns on, and she looks at it, and then they pan over to him, Kamir, and he looks at it, and they go back to Jackie, and she kind of has that little quick smirk on her face.
That was
it was
awesome.
Like Anakin Skywalker all over again, going into full swing with dual lightsabers. But that was just a great timing and use of the effect and the gimmick, as I said earlier. But Yord tells her to run away, and this is where Kamir walks away at this point. So we flip over to May, and this is where she finds Kelnaka's lightsaber. She's still hiding in his little hut there, or whatever it was. She takes a saber and then she runs out. And again, this is kind of where it's like jumping back and forth. But again, I don't know. I felt like the pacing was good. It worked for me, at least, going on here.
Yeah, this was doing really well. I don't think it slowed down until Osha and Yord started going back towards the ship. Yeah. That was the part that really, I think that dragged it down a little bit and slowed the pace, which I wasn't a fan of. But the more I think about it, it did help. It did help kind of relax you just enough, and then you want to get back to it. But it was a little bit disruptive in that way. But the May scenes, no, it's like, okay, what is she gonna do? What is she gonna do when she finds his saber? And like what is going to be the impact whenever she goes out there, and what is she going to do to get involved, or is she going to avoid it? It was really interesting where they went with May here, that she's basically just in like pure self-preservation mode and trying to just get out and escape, which makes sense, but it was a little bit surprising at the same time that she wasn't going to take any cheap shots.
Yep. This is where she's running through the forest. She kind of pauses briefly, trying to get her bearings. Again, in the background, you can hear the lightsaber combat still going on. She pulls Pip's head out, uses it as a flashlight. Had she done that before? I don't remember her doing that.
I think this is the first time we've seen him as a flashlight. Well, he's been used for other things, I think.
Right.
And pulled apart. Yeah.
Eventually, Kamira catches up with her, and we finally get the explanation of the lightsaber being thrown, whipping around, cutting 3 trees, and then going into somebody's mysterious hand. It turns out to be Kamira's hand. Looks like he just called the lightsaber back, which...
Oh, and Soul interrupted it before it got to Osha and batted it back, and he called it back, right?
Yeah, good call. But yeah, once Soul jumped in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great stuff. And I think their better battle was later on when they were unarmed, and Soul just goes berserk on him. But more on that in a little bit, because I've got a lot of talking points there. The 3 trees that...
You kind of skipped over like the impaling of the Jedi and the beheading of the Jedi.
Well,
like the mass murder and the slayings of the Jedi, like those were. What'd you feel about that? Because it was actually kind of a cool death, right? He's battling, I think, 3 Jedi at once, or I think something like that. You know, he kills one like in front of him, stabs to the chest. He stabs another one, and then uses the Force to pull the other one onto the same saber. So we had 2 of them like a kebab at the same time, and then he finishes them off right behind the tree, so you don't see that part of it. But that was a really, I mean, it was brutal. But it was wicked cool, just the ingenuity, and like he's already got one skewed. Why not bring the other one off? You know, catch him off guard and do the same. What do you think about that type of, I don't know, that type of execution? I guess.
Well, I mean, it's very much in character of the dark side, and if you go back to like the old Republic video games, even the novels, some of the violence in that, it's pretty much on par with what you would expect. I think it also plays into this what Yord says a little bit later about. There's no method to his technique. Like, you know, they're used to going through their katas and doing their practices, and it's always the same people using the same styles, right? When you bring a Sith, or, you know, and we're going to call him a Sith based on what he says in this episode and what Mandy Jacinta says in the EW article that came out tonight. He does say he calls him a Sith Lord. So for now, we'll take that, but we will talk about, like, what if it's not still. But for the sake of the argument, let's just say Sith Lord. But when you come across a Sith, that whole chaos kind of aspect to the battle and doing things that are unpredictable in that way. And I think that's really what caught a lot of these Jedi off guard, is that they've never fought anything close to this before, right? Even during what we know during the High Republic era, they're using their lightsabers all the time, but they're not fighting other lightsaber users. It's just not, there's nobody else running around. I mean, except Markion Ro, but you know, he's just using it as, you know, because he's got like kind of like sword combat really, but not using the Force and using the lightsaber in which a Force user would use. So all that plays into it. And I think it's an easy way to explain why they were thrown off guard, why they were kind of fumbling around trying to fight, you know, 5-on-1 seems like it'd be kind of, you know, in the odds of the Jedi or the favor of the Jedi. And it turned out to not be the case. But again, less is more sometimes. And I think that's what we got here. There was something about pulling the way Alex Lopez pulled that camera off to the side to show and cover up the heads, even though you saw where it was going to go, and you're like, oh my God, that's brutal kind of thing. You know, it would have got a totally different rating if they actually showed it, and they didn't need to. It was still as effective given how it was cut and given how it was framed. So I thought it was great, and it certainly speaks to the Sith in a lot of ways and how they combat.
Yeah, and there was a poster over on Twitter today that actually broke down the lightsaber form in the context of what the stranger was performing, and again, it was really well. It was very, very detailed, and I'm not an expert in this to know how accurate it may have been, but the concept behind it though was very much like what you were saying. Was the Sith take a form, a usually uncommon form, and maybe one that's not as generally accepted, and they blend other forms with it, and then they had like this chaotic aspect to it as well, to where you just don't know what's happening. And the Jedi don't train all of the forms, and they usually kind of pick one. But with the Sith, they're usually experts in 2, 3, 4 as many as once. This is what made Anakin so good, is because Anakin was very well trained in many of the forms. Same with Dooku as well, right? And while they may have had their go-tos, they were able to switch between these forms in a very, fluid way to be able to do it. And that's what makes this character so dangerous, is that you just don't know what to predict, and they haven't learned all of these because they're not in this very controlled, very keep your zone very tight and narrow. Your defenses are very tight. All that stuff goes out the window in real combat, and you start to see some of the inexperience of the Jedi in a real life fighting scenario come through when you have an opponent who doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want more kind of, if you want an expose or an exposition, I should say, on the chaotic nature of lightsaber combat from Siths, watch the Palpatine versus Maul versus Savage fight.
Oh, also known as one of the greatest lightsaber battles in all of Star Wars, period, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's on the Clone Wars, and at times it looks like you can just see him switching up, and he's just toying with them left and right. But I mean, they're having a hard time keeping up with him because he's just shifting around how he attacks him, the way he attacks.
Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, it's a great battle. All right, we get the whole kind of civilian to the ship call out here. This is where Sol tells Yord to get Osha out, as Kamira's just kind of standing there.
Civilian. That was weird.
And she was ready to hold. I mean, she had her blaster up. Like, it looked like she was ready to kind of join in the fight and do her part, even though, she had already taken one shot. It didn't really have much of an effect. Right. But I did like that Yord kind of pushed her away and picked her up and took her off. And it's unfortunate because, honestly, you got to think, like, what would have happened if Yord had gotten her to the ship, right? I think a lot of this dynamic would have changed. I mean, who would have lived? Who would have died, kind of thing. Right. And, it's like the one time Mr. By the Book doesn't do what he's supposed to do, did not turn out to be, good for him. Though I will say that I loved how he went out. Mm-hmm. I thought that was pretty heroic and cavalier. But, okay. Let's see. So this is where we get Kamir and Sol now kind of staring each other down. A lot of samurai showdown effects going on here. I don't think it's here, but a little bit later when they're doing that little quick run together, and the way the camera went down to kind of show that run, that is right, all like
shuffling back,
like shuffling their feet. I mean, it's like right out of like samurai movies. It's so
much of this was all from like very inspired from Come Drink With Me, the old Shaolin monk, like Kamir's character, I think in general, but even like some of this fight sequence was just very, like you were saying, very inspired by these old samurai type of movies. That it was just, they captured it perfectly. And I think the outfit too, you see it a little bit later in actually towards the end of the episode, what Chimera is actually wearing, and it's a beautiful outfit. If you kind of take all the Sithy stuff away from it, but it was really perfect, and like the costume design of this episode was fantastic for that character.
Yeah. On a quick note about the civilian to the ship comment, how did you read that? Like I only took it as merely, let's see, I would call it Sol pulling rank, if you will.
Yeah. Because
I mean, she was trained at some point. I don't know how well she was trained or how proficient she was in lightsaber combat. She didn't have a lightsaber. Okay. So right there, all she's got is this blaster. He's probably thinking there's nothing she's going to add to this fight. And he's just in danger in her life. She does not need to be here. She is technically a civilian, even though she was a Padawan. And so really the best thing to do is just to get her removed from this, right? I can take this guy on. Of course, this is like his first encounter. So he's thinking, all right, I'm a master. I'll take her on. Yord, get her back to the ship. Let's keep her safe, kind of thing. But I know people have looked at this as kind of being like a slight because they use the word civilian and not, hey, take Osha to the ship. But I think he was just kind of pulling rank and trying to be neutral about it.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, this is just them. I think it is a bit putting her in her place, but not in a derogatory way. It's just reminding her, like, this is not your fight. And like you said, there's really nothing, or there's very little she would be able to add. And quite honestly, she's a bit of a liability in that case, especially if he starts going after her. Then they have to start making decisions. And I think his own attachment starts to get into some of that too. And you could even view it from that perspective, that he's calling her civilian to keep his lines a bit clearer too about how he feels about Osha, and to take that out of the equation, so he doesn't have to feel like he has to make any hard choices should something go wrong. But again, there's not a lot she could really add to this. I mean, like you said, she took her pot shot at him and it didn't really work, and she was willing to stand with, and she wants to stand with them, and she feels like one of the team. But you gotta just call it like it is. She's just not. She hasn't been trained. She hasn't been doing anything Jedi like for 6 years or whatever it is, and doesn't have force abilities for the most part, at least nothing that we're seeing overtly. We're getting some semblance of that the connection with May in particular is coming back, and there's some other things, but she's not going to go and actually contribute to a lightsaber fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't bring a blaster to a lightsaber fight.
That's right.
You don't bring a stun gun to a to a
that's like
lightsaber
even
fight.
at least like the least effective weapon to bring.
Right. Yeah.
So at this point, we're getting to the title. We're only at the title sequence here, or the title page of the Acolyte. But I love the way this was all filmed here, because we after they walk away, we get Kamir kind of turning his head, real creepy, kind of horror movie style. Jason, or Michael Myers from Halloween, kind of tilting his head, looking at him. And the camera, it kind of zooms in as Soul has his lightsaber out, and the music is like super intense. And then it cuts to the title screen. So it was a great little sequence there, the way it was kind of put all together. Loved every part of that. And then it kind of loses, I wouldn't say momentum, but we cut now over to Basil, who I know Alex he's in the chat with us. He's been talking about how kind of like there's this Alice in Wonderland theme that's going on, or it feels like at times there's like an Alice in Wonderland thing. And when I saw Basil come out, I thought, oh, follow the white rabbit kind of thing. It looks like he's going to lead you somewhere. But Yord and Osha see him. They say that, Osha says they need to go back. And Yord kind of sticks to his guns here and is like, no, we have our orders. And they end up following Basil again, which, they're going to lose him because they already established that. But we probably saw that coming. So,
yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I think the episode does lose a little momentum when we switch back to these, like to Yord and Osha and I guess Basil for the times that we see him. That's a good way of putting it. It just loses a little momentum.
Here's what I would say too. And I have thought about this quite a bit. And again, part of my being okay with it is television, and I'm not trying to give the show or the series a pass, but if you watch like Rebels, Clone Wars, any other television that we've had before us, when they have these action sequences, this is not uncommon. It's just that it's presented in live format now for us. And I think when you try to hold that up against a movie, which are trying to do totally different things, given you've got a 2-hour time frame versus, I don't know, whatever 8 episodes at 30 minutes comes out to 4 hours, it's a very different, right? So I think, to be fair, it's not uncommon for television to do this. We get in the middle of a big action sequence and it cuts away and we get something else going on. And we kind of lose momentum and then we go back. The best thing about this episode and why it worked is because when we cut back, there was always something huge happening, right? There was always something to kind of keep pushing us forward and bringing us back into the scene, immediately sucking us right back into the action in a lot of ways. So that's why it worked. When you don't have that, that's when people start going, wow, we really lost momentum there and it didn't really work. That didn't happen in this episode, honestly. There was just too much going on, too fast at times.
Right. And the release was a purpose of why, like, what do they bring back to the table when they're going to go back, right?
Yes.
But what are they going to do? And there was a reason behind it. And I was actually glad some of those didn't play out like they normally was. Like usually the bad guys carried away and pulled in half or eaten or whatever it is. And that didn't work out this time. So I was glad that the end result didn't follow into those old traps.
Yeah. So we get our first kind of monologuing happening from Kamir here. We cut back over to Soul versus Kamir. And he says, Master Soul, you don't remember me. Now, on the surface, we could all go back. Oh, he's talking about when they were on Olega, right? When they met him in the apothecary, and that's why. Because Soul says, "I sense something familiar."
Right.
I don't buy that. Like the way that line was delivered,
got to be more to it.
There's got to be more to it, right? Yeah. And that the only thing more to it would be some kind of connection back to Brendock, or if you really want to get into your tinfoil hat theories, they're related in some way, or he was an apprentice, or he was there as a Padawan on Brendock and they killed him and they never talked. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there, right? But I guess the takeaway here is like there is something more there. And not only just this line, but when you add this to the other things that he says throughout the episode, there's something going on. Something else is brewing. Spidey sense is going off. But I guess, do you have any other theories, any other thoughts? What did you think when he said this line?
It was I thought it was more, my initial response was I thought this was a misdirect for Coral to be potentially under the mask.
That's a good point. I think I thought that too. It's like, oh, it's kind of it could be Coral, but you're right. Yes,
that was my first response. I was like, oh snap, they're going to tempt us with this, and it still seemed unlikely, but it was on the table. It was back on the table. And it was front and center on the table. It was very much a real possibility. But when it was finally revealed to not be Coral, of course, it really got me thinking, like, where would he have been? Like, it was a all women society at the Coven.
Mm-hmm.
The Jedi, we didn't see him at all within that story. Now, again, that was through Osha's perspective, so maybe it wasn't there. But so how does that actually fit? And so we need more of the story to be able to figure that part out. But it was a very interesting comment that they do have something of a history behind all this. But Soul, again, even throughout the rest of the fight and the rest of the episode, we get no indication that he really knows who this character is at all.
Correct.
Now, granted, if it was a much at the time of these events, much like May and Osha were, then you would understand if you don't recognize the kid, 16 years later as he's growing into a full adult.
Yeah.
But again, we don't really quite know how old he is, but presumably he wouldn't have been any older than a young teenager or something like that. So
yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of a misdirect, but clearly more to it. I'm interested to see where that goes, but I really don't have any theories to it because quite as everything has a hole in it, it seems like we just don't know anything. Now, what I will say though is Leslie Headland says that she doesn't like storytelling when it's like, aha, you didn't know these things, but they really happened, and here they are. She doesn't believe in that. So it seems unlikely some of that stuff would be there. So maybe he is just being as literal about Olega. But why would Soul recognize him from Olega unless he's sensing, something dark about him? But presumably he's projecting a very different aura, essence about him than he would have back in the apothecary.
Yeah. There's at some point, I don't know when we'll talk about this, maybe on the Khmer episode, but I've seen a lot of people upset because the Jedi aren't sensing these dark side users. May later at the very end of the episode, Khmer hiding in plain sight. I'm like, have you not been watching, reading Star Wars? Like they've been doing this forever. They hide. They go get their groceries. They go out and go into the public at times too, right?
I don't know if
they have the dark side.
Oh, you know about this guy named Palpatine. He quite literally did this for the better part of a dozen years or more.
Right. And it would take somebody with his power to hide amongst, being in the Senate. I mean, that's like a fine example of how much power he had to be able to hide that much. Right. But in general, when the Sith are out, they don't necessarily are like giving off, like if it almost feels like people are like, the Sith should have a 50-foot aura radius of darkness with them at all times. And how can anybody interact with them that's force sensitive and not sensitive? It just doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. There's probably, you could probably argue there's a Star Wars explanation for it, but it really gets in the way of storytelling. So how many stories would be ruined if that was really the case? But okay, I just want to get that off my chest.
Well, if you sorry, I know you want to move on, but just think back like the Darth Bane novel. So if we would go back to the beginning of the Rule of Two, while Bane couldn't get out himself because he started to have the growths and everything on it, he sent Xana out. Xana was very much in the community and would just be a part of it. And granted, there weren't exactly Force users very prevalent within all of that usually. I think there may have been one or two. It was still something that they were still out in the open, but whenever they had some other physical change to them or whatever it might have been, they did have servants to go do a lot of things. And when you have this character looking for an acolyte, you have these other people trying to go out and do these things, but they're still somewhat covert, even though they're in plain sight to an extent, but they're not out there flaunting everything at the same time.
Yeah. Zora Allen just gave us a good explanation or example here. Concealing Force signature is a dark side ability. Even Ventress was an expert in that form. Cestus Deception, Legends novel. I'm a big Ventress girly. Yeah. And that's my point. Like it's happened so many times. So I don't understand why people are so bent out of shape and they did sense something. Like, to be clear, when Master Soul got there, he like turned around and was like freaking out. Like, what's going on? They don't know they don't really exactly know where it is, but they do sense something is going on, right? There's some disturbance in the Force.
New Jedi Order was the same way, right? They could mask their presence. They could go in on themselves and make themselves very, very small in the Force, so you wouldn't really be able to sense them in a public setting. And of course, Darth Status was very much like that, Jason Solo. Yeah. So it is rooted in Legends material, so it's not surprising in any of those ways. And again, they're not being very overt with any of that stuff because I just don't think they need to. You would just assume bad guys don't want to be found, so they do things to mask their presence. And
right.
To me, it just seems kind of obvious, but I guess some struggle with it more than others.
Yeah. Yeah. She's calling up Palpatine here. I mean, he's walking around with Anakin. On the other side, you've got people like Luke who just cut the Force off. Like, sorry, you can't find me anywhere at this point, kind of thing.
Right.
All right. They get it. So he says, I sense something familiar. They have a quick lightsaber clash back and forth. Great stuff. Choreography. We're not going to break all that down. But you can hear Khmer, like he's seething underneath the mask. Like he's really upset, or maybe he's trying to make himself upset or whatever it is. But you can actually hear something going on underneath the helmet there. This is where Soul says you carry a Jedi weapon, but you are no Jedi. I could not help but think of, Ahsoka, I'm no Jedi kind of thing. He rushes in to
very
attack.
different context, my friend.
Yeah, very different context. I know, but that line, every time that line comes up, I'm like, oh, they said it. He rushes in to attack, and then we cut, and we go to May. She's kind of doing a quick assessment of how things are going on, or what's going on outside the hut there. This is where she walks out with Kel's lightsaber, and then out of nowhere, I mean, Jackie is just such a badass in this episode, beginning to end.
Brought in a Jackie bomb. Yeah.
She comes in with like the Chuck Norris flying like kick to the face kind of thing.
It's like WWE action. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great stuff. And then so we get the Jackie versus May kind of throwdown where they're kind of going back and forth. And this is where Jackie force pushes May into the house. I think she goes blowing outside the house itself at one point there. And then she uses the force to like turn around. Like after she pushes her out, she uses the force to like spin her body around, grab her hand, and at least get one cuffs on before May then flips her over and throws her off her. So, and we talked about this
before Jackie got to do some righteous indignation of reading her rights and what she was under arrest for. I was like, all right, we're going to bring that righteous Jedi fury into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, she's like calling out, you killed Adara, you killed Torben, killed Naka, and then when she said,
killed your family
with the fire, right? You started the fire that killed your family. That's when she flipped out, like got rageful, which I think goes back and explains, like, I think we've said this from the very beginning. Neither one of us, and I think most of us that have been following the show, don't truly believe that little candle started that fire, right? Or that she was responsible for killing her family. Right. But yeah, you can see it. Like, this is a very sore subject with her. Like, how dare you say, or, imply or, allege that I did something like that. But this is where she ends with like flying she does that kick and kicks Jackie through the wall. I'm sorry. Jackie's the one that flies through the wall and lands there.
Right. Yeah. Outside of in the back side of the hut.
Yep. Back over to Soul. And this is where we get the little footwork where they're kind of shuffling feet back and forth. Very samurai-ish. Soul kind of seems to be the better fighter here. I think they're pretty much, I don't know, is that fair to say? Until we get to the unarmed combat where Kamir literally gets a crap beat out of him. Yeah. I mean, it felt like let's just be honest. We're going to break this down again on Sunday. I keep saying that, but there's just something about the level of prowess, the level of expertise that he has that really brings a lot of questions to me now about like, who is his master? How long has he been training? How long has he been around? This is not just some kind of, lowly acolyte who had a couple lessons, down at the Y or whatever. He's been like hardened and he has taken on the best of the best. We'll see if Vanessa Rowe comes into all of this and how he fares up against somebody like her, if that turns out to be the case. But I would say he's on par with Soul. I mean, he took on all the other Jedi, and it feels like outside of that one sequence where, I don't know, maybe Soul tapped into the dark side, or at least he just had a kind of a adrenaline rush of sorts. But for the most part, I thought he did pretty well. He held his own against everybody, including Soul.
Yeah, he did. I mean, this is something with the Sith, right? They don't seem like they would really have a lot of real life combat experience either, much like the Jedi, but this is what they train for. When the opportunity is ready, they're ready, and there's no second guessing about whether they'll hold their own against one or more Jedi, and they have to be ready to face more than one because there are so many Jedi in the galaxy that if you encounter one, you're going to encounter more than one. And you might, in this case, you're counting many Jedi Knights with the Jedi Master. So, and maybe, I don't know if these others were Jedi Masters or not, but at least we had one Master and the rest were Knights and some Padawans. But
true.
I think they just have to always be ready. And I'm with you. I think they were very evenly matched. I think, especially, this is where the Jedi have a bit of a disadvantage, right? They're always holding back in some way. And we definitely see that when Soul starts giving in, and I think it was giving into anger. We could say if he's touching the dark side, but he's definitely giving into anger.
His emotions, right?
And his emotions, exactly. So that is starting to drive Chimere back. But I think from a overall Jedi, like true Jedi versus Sith, they were very much evenly matched, and Chimere even had the advantage at times in many ways. But Soul did seem to be holding his own pretty well to where it was pretty much a stalemate, without other people getting involved.
Yeah. Echo Base Network says, hey guys, thank you for showing up here. What perplexes me is that when the helmet does come off, Soul made no effort to read his mind. Good saber fight, so hope you guys are enjoying it, gentlemen. Yeah, I don't know. It's to be determined. Like, there's so many things that we've seen so far in all 5 of these episodes now where kind of have us scratching our heads. And I think some of that stuff is starting to firm up. So I'm going to wait to see if they explain it. If not, then I think it's fair criticism. Why wouldn't he use it? I think maybe in this moment, I don't know what he would be looking for. I think he's probably more focused on holy bananas. There's this guy that's just killed all these Jedi, and I don't necessarily need to know like the identity or any of that stuff. It's all about self-preservation right now. I need to get, myself safe. I need to get OSHA safe. We got to get the hell out of here, report this back up, whatever it is. And so I don't know, maybe that's probably just not on the forefront. Whereas somebody like Kamir, I mean, he's thinking this is what the Jedi do. And so he's going to keep the helmet on as long as he can, or as long as he needs to, because he's worried about all that. But I think they're kind of thinking, they're coming at this from two different places. And I don't think Soul's I need to read his mind on his mind.
Yeah, just jumping ahead a little bit, but when the helmet is actually gone, you have to remember that's a traumatic event for Soul. He just lost his Padawan, like killed right in front of him. Reading someone's mind's probably not at the top of that list of things to do, but I think it's a great point though to make. And I had a very similar question of, well, why didn't he try to get more information from him, especially a little bit later on? But it was an interesting comment though that I wear the helmet. It was almost like Magneto, right, where he's wearing the helmet to keep Professor X out of his head. And I didn't know that these helmets could do that, or Cortosis maybe can do that.
I think it's a newer aspect. I don't remember any example of Cortosis in Legends where it did block out that sort of stuff.
Right, but the exchange when he says, "Why don't you show you're a master that doesn't show your face to your pupil," right? Was this? And I love the response. No.
Yeah,
it was just so creepy and it's so great, but also the retort was absolutely fantastic. But it'd be interesting to see what if we get any background from Chimera. But this would have been a great opportunity for that stuff to come out a little bit and it give us a little more to play with. But was it absolutely needed? Probably not. And I think when you put it in the context of the moment, it's easy for me at least to get on board that it wouldn't have even crossed my mind if I was mourning the loss of my Padawan and getting really pissed off in a result.
Yeah. I mean, Soul is he seems to be focused, at least right now, he's focused on trying to find out, to be fair, like not to counter that, but he is focused on trying to understand who this person is, right? He says,
yeah, in this moment, he is. Yeah.
You train May, show your face. He questions what kind of master hides from his face from his pupil. And then the retort is, you tell me. And again, that's another comment that felt it was laced in some way. Like, what is it about, from Kamir's perspective, what is being hidden here? Like from a master and pupil kind of thing, right? It could just be the fact that, I think by the end of this episode, I think we're walking away thinking, okay, Soul, we love you. He's an amazing person, but he is fallible. And he may have done something that he regrets. He's got a lot of grief for. He did cover up, didn't think it would ever come back and resurface. And holy bananas has it resurfaced in a lot of different ways and horrible ways. And I think there's something there. And we'll probably find out what that is. Episode 7, most likely, is where it's kind of leaning towards. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just kind of based on what are the hidden secrets here that the Jedi keep with them and take to the grave kind of thing.
Yeah. And Zaral's just made in the chat as well. It's the way that Chimera takes what Soul says to him and just flings it right back at him. And because it's the duplicity of everything. And that's one of the themes in the story of, how can you say these things about us as the Sith whenever you are doing things that are really no different than what we're doing at a very fundamental level? Now, granted, they go about them in very different ways of violence and whatever else and manipulating and so on and so forth. But at its very base level, lying, misleading people, putting a false face, to who you really are or what you've done, and then pretending to be righteous. I mean, those are common themes throughout the series, and he's very much pointing them out. And this is what the Sith have always been very good at pointing out, of like you hide behind doing the right thing and being do-gooders, but you do a lot of things that are a little more on the shady side too that you just don't want to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Sith code is laced with all kinds of just, sarcasm.
And again, I don't know that this is necessarily tearing the Jedi down. And I think before the show came on, and we had talked about this in the final hype, is that it is going to show, like you were saying, it does show the Jedi as fallible and then they make mistakes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they go out there doing really horrible, terrible things. But there might be some things that make us question, like, what would I do in that moment? And then maybe we'll have a nice debate about, if you were in that moment, what are your options and what would you do? Don't get in your ivory tower or on your pedestal, and be in a real situation, in a high stress situation. What would you do? You know, and it's usually not so cut and dry. It's not so obvious. It's very much like law enforcement, right? When you're in a really high pressure situation, what is the choice you're going to make? Sometimes it's not the right choice, even though you want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, and so it'll be interesting to see when we get to the end of the series what debate we can have about some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like there's so much that's going to get teased out here over time.
Right.
Hopefully by the series end. All right, let's go. We need to move on. Let's go to May and Osha. And there's two scenes here. I'm going to pull in a scene that happens a little bit later because we get a quick scene where they're just kind of fighting. May and Jackie are fighting. Jackie is cut, and Osha hears it, right? She hears the scream that goes out. And that's when Yord says that thing is too dangerous and they need to get her back to safety, right? He's still trying to stick to the plan here.
Right.
I love that he used the word "that thing" because it does hit home this idea that they really don't have any idea what this thing is. Like, and to be fair, and I think we've said this, right? If you contextualize that they have not been around any Sith for 900 years at this point, essentially, this is not the first thing that's going to rise to the top. And yes, I know they've got a red lightsaber, and yes, they're Force sensitives, but still, like, these are the things of legends. And why would they ever suddenly come back? I mean, Soul asked that question. Oh my God, I was screaming at my television when he finally said, "What do you want?" Or why, what was it? Why do you want, why right now kind of thing? Because I think that's the question I've been asking since this series started. But more on that later. But yeah, I mean, they have no reason to think anything Sith-wise or, dark. It feels just like a dark side user. But I do like the fact that he called it that thing because they're not clear or sure what that is, to be honest.
And then Chimera later on calls Jackie it.
Yeah, right.
Right. So, I mean, it's same perspective in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Different side of the coin.
So the next scene that I'm pulling in, it's not in sequential order here, but the next scene is where Osha says, Yord, or what is he, Yord, trying to ask about Chimera. He says, I don't know. He doesn't follow the rules of combat. There's no method to his movement. It doesn't make sense. He gets into your head and he stays there.
That was a really interesting comment.
Yeah, it was. Like, that lingers with you because you think, all right, so, he's got the helmet on. Maybe he's able to get in the heads. Maybe it's like, it's not bidirectional. It's like unidirectional. You can go in, but you can't come out, or go out, but you can't come in, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is interesting. And I wonder how much of that is Chimera exercising some kind of dark side ability, or it's just the presence of the dark side itself, around him as he's fighting. That's getting into their heads, kind of thing. And it's hard. It's not hard for me not to go there, given what we're dealing with right now in the High Republic, especially during Phase 3 with, the Drengir. Whenever they're around, they could feel that presence. But when we get to like the Nameless and stuff, I mean, that really kind of, it's a totally different thing. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but there is something about a heavy dark side presence when it's being emitted that way, or if it's being emitted, consciously, that can screw with the Jedi in a lot of ways. Did you take this though? This is the question. Did you take this as he's exercising power that the mother had and was trying to maybe control him at some point or at any point during the battle?
No, I actually viewed it more directly to what Chimera was doing with May later on when he was calling her a coward when she was running, and we'd have the flash of the helmet. I viewed it probably more literal of what they showed us. Although with Osha's comment that, my mother could do the same type of thing.
Yeah, which
maybe
is the follow-up comment on here. Sorry, but yeah,
it's kind of a correlation between that, though, and again, linking it to you don't recognize me. I mean, it makes you start to question about, was there another presence that we just didn't know about, or is there someone else pulling the strings? Maybe, and
right.
Some of these relationships came later, but it is an interesting one. But I took it a little more literally of what he was doing to May when she was running away.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. And yeah, we're led to believe there's definitely a very thick breadcrumb trail that takes us back to, what happened there on Brendok and with the mom and powers there.
We love to speculate, but I think we continue to have to learn the lesson over and over and over and over and over and over that they're kind of telling us what's going on. We just have to believe it.
Yeah. The weird dynamic here, and I love it. I love the creativity. Is just the fact that we only have one perspective, and so it's really difficult for us to kind of. And we've been saying this, trying to make excuses here, but it is hard to speculate and theorize when we don't even know if we're being told what we see is real.
We know this much of the story. Right? This is the story, right? I mean, it's so much more. We only know this little sliver, and like you said, we're getting it through one perspective right now. So until we get more, it's difficult to really try to piece it all together.
Yeah, yeah. We get a quick battle again with Sol and Kamir. It's kind of like the finishing part of it before Kamir decides to run off. He gets they kind of have a couple few saber clashes, and then I think I keep forgetting, one of them gets kicked off. I think it's Kamir kicks Sol back. Sol goes tumbling, and then when he gets up, Kamir is now run off.
Right.
So just one thing I forgot to mention earlier. In the earlier battle, I love the fact that Kamir turned off his lightsaber, because you wouldn't expect a Sith. I mean, this goes back to that chaotic nature of them, right? Turning off the lightsaber when you expect them to have it and just go all out all the time. Mm-hmm. That's disruptive. And not only is it disruptive in like, okay, why did he turn off his lightsaber? Because as a Jedi, the first thing that pops into your mind, and we saw this on screen later on, is like, okay, well, he's unarmed now, so should I attack him? Kind of thing. Even though I think we as audience members like, no, just cut his head off. Like, just do it, dude. You're fine. There's all kinds of ways you can go through rehab. Trust us.
Yeah, you can figure that stuff out later. It's
right.
Therapy, right?
Yeah, exactly. But him turning off the lightsaber like that, and then going into some kind of monologue or playing with their mind in some way, or just disappearing altogether, is very disruptive, right? It makes things very difficult for the Jedi to kind of comprehend and keep up with. He does it a few times. I think there's like 3 or 4 times where he suddenly just disappears. And I think when you look back at the motive for each of these, it seems to be a reoccurring theme. If he keeps trying to go back to May, right? He's running off, still trying to find May, either for revenge or what I guess is what it looks like, but it could be other things. I don't know. Did you have a problem with this? I've seen some folks say, why does he keep running off? How come he doesn't just kill Sol? Why doesn't he try to finish the battle? Any thoughts around that?
I had the same questions at first as well. But also it goes back to, he doesn't want May to escape because she knows more than what he is comfortable with, and he can't let that get out. And so it makes sense that he would go back to the Jedi. Aren't going to go anywhere. If he's on that planet, if he's there, they're not going anywhere either. Yeah. So I think he feels more comfortable about that. And also May's an easier target for him too, to be able to hunt down, at least in his perspective. Now she's proving to be resourceful, and the Jedi keep interfering at the inappropriate times. Of course, we see that numerous times throughout the rest of the episode. But I think it's mostly I think it is a revenge base. I think he is definitely actually trying to kill her. And I think he basically got very close 3 different times, if my count was right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's very much it. He's just trying to eliminate that threat to their discovery that Sol pointed out. Well, why risk discovery? And he's got loose ends now, and he's got to wrap up all the loose ends, because otherwise everything is for naught. And then you have a manhunt across the galaxy by the Jedi. They have something to hunt, and they will hunt. Yep.
All right, we go back to May versus Jecki again. This is like part 2 of their battle. This is where May gets the blade, kind of gets her in that chokehold, and has the blade up to her neck. We saw that. We speculated on that on the Patreon episode last week, and I think we were pretty spot on a lot of this stuff, honestly. Not to toot our own horn here. But Jecki escapes and cuffs May with the second hand there, so she's able to get that second cuff on her. And then this is where Jecki takes Kel's lightsaber, and suddenly the darkness creeps in. Like, you can see it visually. She kind of has a sense like, oh, what's going on? That was the creepiest thing. Like, I don't know if you saw it in the Entertainment Weekly article, but they talked about how they filmed the ascension or the descension. They filmed that in reverse.
In reverse, yeah.
Yeah, to kind of give us that. That was a nice little choice. But this is another one of those like horror movie sequences where you see the main character and then you see something running at them in the background with no audible sense of whatsoever. There's nothing audibly in there. And it was like creepy just to see that thing run up on her like that. But I love that sequence.
Well, and instantly you're like, oh no, Jecki's in danger. Like real legit danger on her own. She's a Padawan. How good is she? And she's very much on the defensive right away. But you're right. I love the way that they kept bringing Kamir back into these scenes as this is almost like a ghost face type presence, right? Where it wasn't the slow, methodical Michael Myers or anything like that. It was very much the on-rushing, the bull rush in some case. A little bit of sinister slyness behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, just a maniac with a lightsaber, that's coming after you because you were next to his actual target and you're just in the way.
Yes.
But it's cool that he actually uses Jecki as the lesson or a lesson to May as well, right? Yeah. You can learn something from this Padawan, right? Loyalty, right?
Yeah. This is after he kicks her over and is trying to teach her a lesson of like, hey, look, she didn't turn her back on her master, right? She's sticking this out to the end kind of thing. And he turns the lightsaber off again after he says that comment. You know, May, you could learn from this Padawan. He turns his lightsaber off. He says she's a loyal pupil. And then Jackie decides that she's going to attack. I don't know if you noticed, but she stepped on that rock and spun around. Do you remember the last time we saw somebody do that? It was in the Ahsoka series when she's fighting Balin's skull.
Oh, yeah.
She runs up. They're on the map area or whatever it was. She runs up, jumps on that rock, and turns around and attacks. I don't know if that's what they did intentionally, but I thought that was a nice little
It's a good
touch.
move anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool. I like the move when it happened in the Ahsoka series, and so it stuck out for me during this one.
Yeah.
But this is where also Kamir then hits her saber with his Cortosa's hand and turns off that blade. Kamir starts attacking her, and this is where she pulls out Kel's blade to kind of block his incoming attack.
Yeah.
They hold each other's guard, and this is that sequence I was talking about where suddenly it comes back on. She looks at it.
I can't help but smile. This is such a cool scene. Yeah.
It was a great moment. And then it was like, oh my God, she just went into like this flurry of, I hate to say it, I'll compare it to like Anakin Skywalker because that's one of the few times we've seen on live action where someone's dual wielding lightsabers. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, man, they spent so much time. I know I keep sounding like a broken record here, but they spent so much time. You can see it in the choreography. It was very well executed. It didn't feel blocky. It didn't feel choppy. It was very fluid. There was a lot of aggression, a lot of motive, real intent and purpose in their attacks and the way they moved and kind of even the space that they used. It was just good stuff, man. You could tell they really put in the hours on this one.
It was so fast, and the movement of the costume design when Jackie would spin and twirl, her outfit would flow with her, right? It would come up on the ends just like you would if you were in a dress doing a spin, right, or a twirl.
Right.
You expect it to flare out, and that's what her lapels would be, or whatever it is on her tunic. And so it just accentuated. It gave it even more speed, but also a certain finesse to a lot of it too. And she's just so fast. I mean, it was really brilliant. This is one of my probably one of my favorite lightsaber fights that we've seen in a while. Like just to carve this one piece out because it was just so fast. Also, the other one was like with her and Soul against him together. I thought it was really cool.
That was a highlight.
The tag teaming was really cool. But I think just the speed in general though of this was absolutely phenomenal. And you're right, the training that Daphne Keene went to, and what they wanted to achieve. I think scenes like this and many of the ones that we got throughout this episode were just absolutely stellar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the bar has been raised. Like, this is what you need for Star Wars television. This is it. This is the bar. So get there. So to kind of finish the sequence off here, after they're doing their, fighting, this is where Kamir cuts off the end of Kel Naka's lightsaber. It gives us that shot at the very end that we've seen in the trailers, and we were trying to speculate on whose lightsaber, and we now know where that is. But he leaves again because while this was all going on, May ran off again. So he leaves in pursuit of May. We cut a very quick sequence. We go back over to our scene where Osha and Yord are kind of in the woods there. There's the Umbra moths around there. And I think when you look at the tree, you realize they've detached from the trees. So they're out kind of about in the area now, which poses a more significant danger presence. This is, of course, setting up the takeaway of Kamir later down the road here. But yeah, she basically says, look, turn around, let's get out of here, let's move slowly. And they kind of walk off. Well,
she tells Yord, like, they're going to die, right? She has a feeling, too, of like something is wrong. Like, they're going to die. We have to do something. We can't abandon them. Yord, what the right thing to do is, right? And now they've got this opportunity here that they can actually do something about it.
I think that's the next scene, but yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought it was this one.
No, that's the part. That's the problem where they keep cutting back and forth like this. Like some of this all blends together.
I lose track of where I'm at. Yeah.
All right, let's get to back to May, where she says, "Coward, you were going to betray me." This is where Kamir is confronting her now.
These were the flashes, like his mask and flash.
Yeah, what did you think about that? Like, that is not what I would call, quote, Star Wars, but we broke that seal, years ago. I mean, let's just be honest, right? Everything from title sequences and the naming of the planets. We've already talked about everything that's no longer, quote, Star Wars. This is a very interesting camera shot. I call it the GoPro shot because it is kind of like, where they mount the cameras to the actors' faces and you can see them. I like the effect. It was subtle. It wasn't like in your face. They didn't overuse it or anything, but it was kind of creepy to see that mass, like literally taking up 90% of my television screen.
It was a great effect. I mean, and again, it just puts you like, this is what they're seeing in real time, right? they black out of what they're running towards, and they just see this presence in their head, behind their eyes, and overwhelming. I think this is what Yord was talking about, where you just have this this dark presence that just somehow maybe doesn't take over you, but definitely instills fear and everything else, to where you just have the fight or flight desires just all of a sudden come out, right? Just those native base instincts start to come out of you, and you're compelled to just keep doing what you're doing or to run away, and that gives the Sith the advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it. It was 2 shots, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was just 2 really quick ones. Yeah, and again, I like that they didn't dwell on this and they didn't overuse it, because I think that was really important, not to overuse this sequence. And we get the point. Let's move on to the next point you want to make. And so I thought it was really expert use of this and keeping it quick. Made the point, move forward.
This is where now she says, "Forgiving Master, I was weak." He says, "You've always been weak," and it looks like he's about to cut her. I suspect he was trying to attack her, and he ends up cutting the binders.
It kind of seemed like he pulled it. This was a little bit awkward. I'll to be critical about it. It was awkward. She felt kind of awkward. She has her binders out. Was he trying to harm her when he's trying to kill her all the rest of the times? But it kind of seems like even when he lands, you can kind of see he's got his saber kind of pulled back a little bit. So, kind of pulled the blow a little bit, maybe. I don't know. So
it's hard to tell whether he did it intentionally or not, like pulled it.
Right. Yeah. But then again, all the other times he's definitely trying to stab her and everything else. So who knows what to make of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does try to, let's be fair. So he cuts the binders in half. This is where he then force pushes her into the rock and pins her with the force. And then he's about to stab her. Yeah. Looks like he's going for blood. Mm-hmm. And this is where Soul pulls away Kamir, pulls him away. Jackie runs in, attacks Kamir. They beat the crap out of him for a little bit there. And then, of course, May runs off. I'm sorry. This is where Jackie flies in. I think you were calling that out, where Jackie flies in with that
bats
attack.
His lightsaber web.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. That was pretty well executed there.
Well, it was great that, again, the Jedi, even though she wants to arrest May and everything, she's still going to protect someone and to make sure that they get the justice is served, and that they're not the ones meting out justice, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Characters like Jackie are still very much pure of mind of what the Jedi should be. I think in a way like Anakin was to an extent with Palpatine, even though he had other motives. But again, hey, this is
Dooku,
not what,
you mean?
No, like he was with when Windu wanted to kill Palpatine.
Oh,
and granted, he had his own motives, so I'm not putting that aside or anything. But it was also, that's not the Jedi way. We still do things our own way. But again, I mean, different circumstance clearly, but that she's still willing to protect someone who's obviously guilty, and doesn't really matter if she lives or dies to the Jedi's perspective, I guess.
I know. He does that. He does say that to Palpatine, but then earlier on, he killed Dooku, cut his head off. But whatever.
Well, I mean, it can give into some things. Yeah.
No, it's totally It was the influence of Palpatine. I'm just having fun. All right. It's hard decisions, man. I don't know what I would decide if I had 2 lightsabers and had an opportunity to kill somebody and end the war. I don't know. I guess I'd do it too.
We didn't even talk about Kamir undoing his lightsaber and having
We're not there yet.
A Jedi. Yeah, he did. He's already been unmasked, hasn't he?
Oh no, he hasn't.
This coming up. Right. That's right.
Hang tight. We're getting there. There's a lot to discuss.
Let's get there faster. Hour and 15 minutes in. We got to move this along.
We got to move this up. Stop talking. Okay. This is where.
That's funny.
That's where Osha says. She says you get in the subtitles. It said little May, where she calls out to her.
Yeah. Right? What'd you make of that?
Well, I don't see, and I think this is where
we got to move on. No, what'd you think about that?
Yeah. I think it did feel like somehow she had a forced premonition happen in that moment. Osha did, this is the point where she turns to Yord and says, "Yord, we got to go back. They're going to kill him." I think she's foreseen all of this, or there was something in May's message, if you will. Because I don't recall May actually saying Osha. I think it was just kind of like this forced projection, or it was the way she interpreted this forced premonition or forced vision, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it was reminiscent of on the ship, right, when she's chasing the young May.
Yes.
Again, it's trying to call some of that back. But
yeah,
it was odd. It was just out of nowhere, and it didn't no preamble to it, and then definitely no follow up to any of it. She just has this feeling. And again, it's more of that, I think maybe it's that young people connection of she still remembers young May, and they still want to take care of one another. And maybe that's just how they interpret each other in the Force right now.
Yeah, could be. So we get back, and then of course, the bugs are out there. I think I don't know if this is the moment where she tells him to turn the lightsaber off or not. But either way, we flip back over to now. This is where we get into the Soul Jecki versus Kamir fight, which I think when they were talking about the scene maybe that they were trying to live up to, this is probably it, because this is like some of the best stuff that we've gotten here. But yeah, this is where Kamir headbutts Soul's lightsaber, kind of extinguishing that, I should say. Soul beats him up a little bit. He trips over a rock down below. Jecki flies in kind of out of nowhere, almost kind of chaotically. I mean, she's so brave, like just so quick to jump and attack. But this is obviously what led to her end kind of thing. But she jumps in, and this is where she hits him. She pummels him with the lightsaber hilt, which is a move in most of the old Republic games. You can pummel somebody with the lightsaber hilt. So I was like,
it's a stun move. Yeah.
Yeah. I was so excited about this. Like, oh my God, this is like right out of SWTOR. But she pummels him in the face twice, breaks the mask in half. I think maybe, I don't know if she necessarily broke it, but somehow dislodges it. Yeah. So, it could come off kind of thing. When that helmet fell down though, I was like, oh crap, here we go. This is it. We're going to get the big reveal. What I was not expecting is the way we got the reveal, which I've already talked about. I think it's freaking iconic. He pulls that little second blade out, and you can see him block her main attack with his main blade. He stabs at the same time he blocks. He stabs once, and then he punctures her 2 more times with the little Shoto blade that was hidden in the hilt. And of course, her body slowly slides over. We get that iconic stance, that pose, biceps ripped to no end. And it's Kamir. So wow, it was just great. That whole sequence was some really good stuff.
It was, she really jumped in there haphazardly. I think she was maybe getting, I'm wondering if she got in a little bit of so enthusiastic to go in there and prove herself and make the kill or something like that. And again, her and Soul were working so well together. They were like Soul would hold her and she came in and punched or kicked and knocked him off balance and woman to kind of hold off to the side. It was just great teamwork, right? Master and apprentice. This is what you expect to see, that they feed off one another. They know what's going to happen between each other. Yep. It was just such a great choreograph, and it really worked well. And the Sith didn't know how to counter that because they don't have that type of relationship with their apprentice to be able to enjoy some of that. At least in this case, he doesn't. So it was a great dynamic of this is how the Jedi could be. The power of 2 is greater than the power of 1, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
But again, once you break them apart, power of 1 on each, again, that message keeps coming across. You could defeat them one by one. In some of these cases, of course, we had examples of the power of many didn't really work out too well for them, but
but the power of Manny did.
The power of Manny sure did. That's right. But yeah, this was devastating, man. It was like looking on the side of a dice, like the 3 side of the dice, like playing Yahtzee and you roll a 3 is like not cool.
Yeah, that's a deep cut, but yeah, I know what you're
no, it was it was brutal, man. It caught me off guard because I was holding out hope. I mean, I was pretty pessimistic that anybody's gonna make it out of this episode, but I was holding out hope, and Jecki was so badass and just rocking it. But when she jumped in and she screamed and she yelled, she was like, I was like, uh-oh, nope. You went in a little too deep there, youngster, and you're probably going to pay the price. And sure enough, it still hurt. It felt like I got stabbed with a lightsaber when I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, no.
Star Wars takes a lot of crap for not taking risks and, killing off characters that they've established as main characters. And that definitely was not the case in this. I mean, hats off to them for doing this. I think you and I left our Q&A session, our Q&A Patreon show on Sunday saying that your Jecki Soul would all live. And I think we were honestly basing that just on history, right? Like typically we don't see the main characters die off ever. And when we do, it's usually on some, season finale or whenever, Palpatine shows up, there's probably somebody that's going to die, or right when these huge, iconic, immortal characters show up, that means significant things are going to happen. And you could argue Kamir is there to be determined, I guess, on that. But the takeaway here is that they did kill off at least one character. Now another one coming up here. Very that was shocking, and just the way they went out was very creative for both characters. Although, well, we'll get to Yor in a second because I don't know if you read his the interview with what's his name, Barnett. No. Oh, yeah, he talks about the death and how he wanted to go out, kind of thing. All right, so this is where I think Kamir mentions Jecki's name, and this is where he fires back. Was that its name? That's a very cold delivery. I mean, Jacinto's just got a way of like he's all over the scale in terms of emotions, which I think was, and again going back to that interview, Hedlund had talked about she made this role like she had him in mind. He never even had an interview because she had already worked with him.
Yeah, she did an
audition. Sorry,
he was the guy. Yeah,
yeah. But definitely his acting prowess and chops were on display here throughout this whole thing. This is where Osha runs up to the battle, and Kamir puts his smaller blade back into his hilt, and Soul says she was a child, and he shrugs and says, "You brought her here." Again, very cold, right in the face of everything the Jedi stand for with that whole Padawan and master and apprentice kind of relationship. But I did start to think again, is this another line that's laced in some way because a child was around something they should not have been in kind of thing? Is he throwing that back in the face? Is this going to rear its ugly head when we finally get the flashback of what happened on Brendok?
It's probably just the whole Jedi doctrine of training, taking children or being gifted children to go train them, and then putting them in the field and putting them. And they can't have it both ways. You can't say you're going to train the student and put them in harm's way or potential harm's way, and then when something bad happens, blame somebody else that that they did this. Now, granted, he is a bad guy, right? I mean, there's no mistaking the Sith is not a good character, not a good guy, rather. But at the same time, the Jedi have as much responsibility in some of that. And you can tell it really, like, Li Zhongjie did a really great job of the emotional reaction shifted from him. And you just saw this despair start to take over. And that's when anger really started to set in for him as well, which I thought was just a great turning point for him. And Kamir was not prepared for the aftermath of what some of these comments might mean.
Yeah. I mean, you could see it. Like, you're right. JJ's a range of emotions, although he wasn't saying a lot as much, maybe, and maybe not, you couldn't really necessarily tell in the delivery of the lines, but definitely on his face. Like, you could see all the different expressions, all the different emotions, all the thoughts, the feelings, everything that he was going through as a character. It would change throughout, based on what had just happened. And it kind of culminated in that rageful, giving into emotion attack on Kamir that we're going to see here, or talk about here in just a second. But we're left to kind of linger on this idea, this thought of like, holy crap, they do bring kids into the battle. And is that really the right thing? We're just left there's silence there for like 2 seconds. And finally, May has walked up. This is where, or is it Osha? I forget.
Osha.
It was Osha. Yeah. Osha walks up, and we get that another line from Manny Jacinto saying, hello, like just completely a whole different character at this point, right back to the, I mean, I wouldn't even say it's the same character that we saw as Kamir, the apothecary kind of fool. It was almost kind of like this psychotic.
Oh, this was May. Yeah. Cause he was revealing himself to May. Yeah.
Yeah. It was May.
Osha came later. He was like, Osha.
Osha. Right. He got
this was
both
the May
of those.
one.
Yeah. Either way, though, I mean, it's just great the way he delivered that just simple line of hello. He kind of distracts Soul with the cloak. I don't know why people are making a big deal about this. He didn't like cover him up. He just threw it really quickly and then ran over to her and grabs her and puts her in a chokehold.
Right.
And then he asked May how did you not know it was me? Not even deep down inside kind of thing. That kind of led me to believe that he had been messing with her and been toying with her and maybe kind of leading that on, which I think backs up what we had suspected, that she may have had a suspicion that he was probably in on this, or at least closely related to the master in some way. And that's why she set that trap, because she could not trust him kind of thing. But I guess your take on that particular line, or any thoughts around, was he intentionally trying to leave hints that he was indeed the master?
I think he was. I think these were all very intentional and being dodgy. And it's a good question about whether or not May actually believed it. We suspected, but this scene kind of makes you believe that she really did not know, or she didn't put those together, and she was just purely focused on Osha. But I think it makes sense that he would. Is my potential acolyte or apprentice going to be smart enough to figure out these things? Are they cunning enough? Right, cunning with the Sith is very important, as much as any kind of martial prowess and those types of things. Right? Can you convince other people to do the things? Can you figure things out that are just below the surface, right? Those things are really important in order to be able to manipulate and control and shift things into your favor, very much like what Palpatine does throughout, all the series we've had, of saying these series of inventions are unfortunate, but they're going to make them work to their advantage in some way, being able to adjust on the fly. So he's kind of testing her throughout all of these things. And I think we've seen some debates about whether or not, killing a Jedi unarmed or without a weapon, what does that truly mean? I think it's another these are all like riddles and teases of sorts of trying to get the apprentice to think differently and think outside the box and do it their own way, even though they still accomplish it. But do they do it in the way that they're supposed to in this more cunning and secretive lifestyle that they have to live right now?
Yeah. I agree all of that. Honestly, it does feel like he was leading her on, and he was planting those little seeds in the back of her mind.
Yeah.
So Soul does try to attack him while he's got one hand choking May, and he's able to kind of fend off a couple of the attacks there, and then he turns off his lightsaber. And this is where he says, "You attack me while my back is turned. Not very Jedi of you." Again, kind of throwing that in the face of like, you guys really aren't who you say you are. It's kind of a facade kind of thing. And then he puts that lightsaber back at May, kind of has her at lightsaber point, gun point kind of thing. And then that's when Soul's like gives in. He's like, forget it. I can't, this isn't going anywhere. Like he throws his lightsaber down, giving up, almost surrendering, and then asks him, what are you? And then we get the big line, right? The big reveal, if you will. He says, I have no name, but the Jedi like you might call me Sith. Now, prior to the Entertainment Weekly article tonight, I still kind of took this as, all right, he's probably not technically a Sith. I was 100% on board, ready to come on the show and say, holy crap, we've got the origin of the Knights of Ren, or it's going to be some offshoot, something related to the Knights of Ren. Everything from the mask to the bulging biceps to the wielding of red lightsabers, force sensitives, right? It just felt like that was more in line of where it was. And him saying, you might call me a Sith, because that's the closest thing you know, or that's the closest thing you probably have documented about what I truly am, or who I truly, or how I perceive myself kind of thing. And now after the article, when Manny's saying that he is a Sith Lord, that the character is a Sith Lord, I think that kind of throws a wrench in it. But I don't know. I'm willing to talk about both, but I guess where do you stand at this point?
Yeah, him calling it a Sith Lord, the character Sith Lord is interesting. And you can't always take actors at face value of what they say, because they are in an interview and they are saying things and they don't always say things correctly. So I think there's always that out there, but it was a very deliberate comment. So, and we talked a little bit of this in Discord. I think Dante had pointed out he's willing to take it at face value right now, if I recall correctly. So I guess, but again, Leslie Headland has said this is about the apprentice and an acolyte, not necessarily the master and the apprentice. So it's a little bit at odds, unless I'm misinterpreting what Leslie Headland was saying previously. So the jury's still out of whether he's the actual master, the actual Sith Lord, and not the Sith apprentice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still probably more in the bucket that he's the apprentice looking for an acolyte, because again, he keeps looking for an acolyte, unless they're just putting a very special emphasis on acolyte in the meaning of what they want acolyte to mean. And this master and apprentice idea is not necessarily something that they get bogged down in labels. They get more bogged down in the philosophy of what an acolyte is, right? And very much the monologue we had at the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
But I'm still probably going to go apprentice right now, despite what Manny Jacinto said in the article. But I imagine we'll get some clarity around this here pretty soon.
Okay.
I still think at the end of the series, we'll probably get a different reveal of the Sith Lord. That's my feeling, but that's just me fanboying a little bit too.
Yeah. Yeah, Dante read the article too. He says, in the article, Leslie said a few things that made him seem fairly certain a Sith. That's where I'm at. I think the one thing, and One Up versus CPU brought it up here. There's two sequences where they play Kylo Ren's theme.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun. They play that twice, and one's like really slowed down. The other one at the very end is like kind of right in your face kind of thing. And so, you couple that with everything that we see just aesthetically about him, feels more of Knights of Ren than Sith Lord.
I would have had so much fun pointing, like poking holes in Knights of Ren, because those guys are wannabes and they're really force weak. So that would have been a lot of fun, because that would have been like,
well, Ren wasn't though. Ren wasn't. I mean, the rest of them were chumps.
The rest were chumps. Ren was okay. Yeah. So if it would have been Ren, but yeah, the rest of the Knights were kind of losers.
They were kind of losers. And this is documented in the Rise of Kylo Ren, I think, comic book.
Yeah, there's that, but they were also in the War of the Bounty Hunter series and
that's
the
right.
Crimson Empire and Crimson Reign series too, with Kira and all of that.
Yeah.
They had a big spotlight within all of that too.
I need to
I
go
think
back
even
to
the Vader series.
Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud now. In the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, there was they did put Kylo Ren through a test. They were like, okay, you want to be part of the gang? you got to go do something. I forget what. He had to go kill like people, and I think it was like kill his former Padawans that he had trained with or whatever it was. So it was very similar in that, where you got to go kill a Jedi kind of thing in order to be initiated into the Knights of Ren. I'll have to find that. Maybe there's some relation there, but I don't know. I'll say this. Having read the article, it feels like we need to take it at face value that, yes, he said he was a Sith. We've got Leslie Headland saying that he's a Sith. We've got Manny Jacinto saying it's a Sith. So for now, I think that's the case. The only one that truly, really knows is going to be Headland. And if she really wants to surprise us and say it's not, and that, you know, he's a fake or he's a wannabe and there's actually a Sith Lord that we're going to see at the very end of the series, she's not going to reveal all that. We won't know that until the very end of the series.
Right. And I'm definitely agreeing with you. Firmly a Sith. It's just whether the apprentice or the master, I guess, is the part that I'm still a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sold, even though we got a very definitive answer from Manny Jacinto specifically on it, but definitely a Sith. I don't think that's in question at all. Again, they're telling you exactly what's going on. I think this is one of the cases we should believe it.
Yep. This is where Soul asks a question. Why risk discovery? Yes. Oh my God. Thank you. Why risk discovery? Yeah, we don't know. He says, well, I did wear a mask is all he said. Kind of like, oh, come on, man. Give me more than that.
I love the smart ass attitude though.
Yeah, it was funny. Although I was like shaking my fist, screaming like Captain Kirk Khan kind of thing. Chimere. But he says, did wear a mask. His next question is, what do you want? He says, freedom. This is where he kicks May down. He says, the freedom to wield my power the way I like without having to answer to Jedi like you. I want a pupil, an acolyte. But this one went back on our deal. She exposed me. So now I have to kill every single last one of you. Thoughts on any of that? There's a lot there.
I mean, it's exactly what you would expect from a Sith, right? You know, they want what they want. And
I think anybody telling them how to get in the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to take it away from them. And I think, again, it makes sense, though. And this is kind of telegraphing it we're really laying it out for the audience. I think more for the casual fan, like people like you and our listeners and me, we understand why they would have to do this, but it also helps you get more comfortable that some of the things that people thought were canon breaking are not really canon breaking after all. And they lay it out a little more clearly for you, hopefully, to understand that and take some of those anxieties away, perhaps, but not really. People still have them, but I think it was still a great line though, of saying, and this goes back to what we had with Mother Anastasia. It's about power and who's allowed to use it. And that doesn't necessarily mean they were wanting to take over the galaxy as the coven, right? But the Sith are very much like, you were the ones who make the rules. And in your life and in your rules, and then we get to this here in just a second, in your rules, the Sith don't exist. So I have to kill all of you because those are the rules you have laid out, dear Jedi.
Yeah.
And I think it was just well written in that regard to spell it out really clearly for us about what it means to be a Sith. When if you emerge from the shadows, like I said before, you are hunted like a dog, and they are and the Jedi are relentless. Palpatine says so himself. You know, they will hunt you down and they will find you and they will overwhelm you. So you have to remain in the shadows. I mean, he's kind of answering it in a subtle way in some ways, but in others, very clearly articulating exactly what it means. And he wants to be in the open. And again, this is why I'm kind of wondering if, go back to the master apprentice angle, the impatience of an apprentice, not the impatience of a master. This feels like the impatience of an apprentice of trying to step out from the shadows, maybe a little prematurely, or trying to do something, and then got caught a bit, in a situation that he's now got to go clean up.
Yep.
It doesn't feel as Sith Lord Master-ish. It does seem like a bit more, and he's a younger character, so that he would be the Lord would be interesting, because usually they tend to be older. But I think also you get that aspect of it to consider.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say the only thing I'll add is the first of all, let me start at the back end of that comment there, or the back end of the quote, saying that he's going to have to kill every single last one of you. I mean, we said as much going into the series. We kind of were playing with this idea. Okay, then going back to the Ki-Adi Mundi line, like how would he not know? And I think one of the first theories we came out was like, okay, well, everybody's going to have to die, right? It's just no one's around to know that this was even a thing, or even could have been considered a thing. The Vernestra Rowe angle and kind of where she's going and what she's done so far makes me think that that's probably some combination thereof of, yes, a lot of people did die, but then there probably is going to be a cover-up from the Jedi as well, right? To what extent, I just don't know. We could see Vernestra Rowe show up and be the one like, oh my God, the Sith are here kind of thing. And then she dies as well. The master shows up and kills her, and we get some battle between those two, right? And so this all kind of still gives Ki-Adi-Mundi his innocence and allows him to kind of say that line without impunity or whatever. So that could still very well happen. What I do want to comment though on the freedom to wield my power the way I like without having to answer to Jedi like you. When you take those two lines and you couple them up with pieces of lie, it feels like he's talking about the Sith code here again. That's the first thing that came to mind. Specifically, the last two lines of the Sith code say, "Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall set me free." Right? The Force shall free me, kind of thing. That sounds like I want to be able to wield the power the way I want to. I want the Force to be free. I want to be able to free myself through the Force, that thing. And of course, the Jedi aren't going to stand for this. They know what that means. It means someone's going to rise to power. And what do the Sith want? They want eternal life. They want to rule the galaxy. They want to enslave people. It's just not going to end well for. They know they can't get this from the Jedi. The Jedi are never going to get on board with allowing them specifically to wield the power that they want.
Yeah, and I think when we were speculating about the show, Final Hype, and everything kind of before it, it was more about kind of calling their bluff. Are they actually going to follow through with killing off a number of Jedi, and including 2 or 3 characters that we are going to end up, liking and loving, with Soul and Jecki and Yord, right? And are they going to have the guts and the gusto to follow through with what we know really should happen at the end of the day? And much like Order 66, are they actually going to go through and kill everybody? And we're in a state in Star Wars right now where you and I have been a little bit critical of this at times. Of it feels like we're afraid to kill anybody off. We're always saving people. We don't. Yeah, they look like they kind of died, but we didn't see a body. So did they really? And then we bring them back like Asajj Ventress and some of these things. It seems like we're afraid to kill characters off that we love because we want to explore more story with them. But in here, it's very clear. Like, no, we killed some characters, and we are like the stakes are very, very high, and they're very, very real. And all of the things you're going to see that are going to come out here of what we would then have to transpose into the Phantom Menace are going to make sense, and they're going to. They're not going to feel good at times, but they will make sense.
Yeah, I think so. It feels like we're heading that right direction. He has got 2 more lines here, a couple more lines, I guess. He says, "I don't make the rules, the Jedi do."
Right.
And the Jedi say, "I can't exist. They see my face, they all die." So I think we've kind of touched on what that probably means based on some of the other comments that we've already talked about. And then he's looking at May and looking at Soul, and he says, "Oh, look at you two, right back where you started." So again, this is he's alluding to something that happened on Brendock or whatever it is. So how he knows is always is going to be determined here. All right, we get Torben's kind of heroic moment here where he steps in and tries to Yord, sorry, not Torben. Yord. Yord runs in. And
Torben forfeit his opportunity.
Yeah, he's already checked out. Right. He punched his card. But no, this is where Yord runs in. And great little sequence here. I love the way it happened. He just kind of sprung out of nowhere. He uses the Force to kind of pull the helmet up. Khmer shorts out Yord's saber with his gauntlet. And then on the inverse of that, this is where Yord shorts out Khmer's saber with the helmet itself. He hits it. Well, that was really cool. Great use of that. And then when he's looking at him, he's like, "You." And he says, "Surprise." They lock manly biceps, which you can't really see very well, but they do there. And this is where Khmer turns Yord around and, pops his head off. Like if they make a bobble head with little springs, I'm going to intentionally take it and just turn it ever so slightly.
You're just going to twist the coils.
Twist the coils, yeah. You're never supposed to do that on pops, but I think it's appropriate with the Yord pop. Sorry, too soon?
It'd be messed up if it just came out that way. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about, again, another shocking death, death of a main character, and very brutal in terms of the way it happened.
That he would have been killed off, I would have been totally fine with, but the way that he died was really surprising. I mean, I did not expect to see this in Star Wars. I mean, we've seen a variety of deaths. We've seen a lot of ways to kill characters in Star Wars, but I don't recall where we've actually seen someone have their neck broken and then head just twisted and snapped.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't get popped off quite like you said, but it might as well have been. It kind of felt like it was really shocking that we saw this. I was just more surprised of just the intimate nature of doing that. We see this in movies all the time, so it's not like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. It's the part I'm struggling with. I'm like, why am I so affected in some way by this? But It's just we don't see this in Star Wars, and that he just did it so casually, and then we see Yord off to the side, eyes open, just lifeless.
Mhm.
I mean, that was really tough to watch. I mean, like if things weren't real enough for Jackie, now they were super real with Yord.
Yeah, and true to her character, this is where May runs off again, and Osha shoots her with the gun again.
Didn't
Fires
miss this time, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, didn't miss this time. She's like, "Oh no, you're not getting away here."
Right.
And of course, we get like kind of one of the coolest moments here. This is where Soul is now. It's all finally just culminating. It's starting to seep in, and he can see the emotion. You can see the rage in him in his eyes. I don't know. The verdict will be out on whether or not he touched the dark side. I think we tend to go there almost immediately. Just Elzar Mann did it. And
I was about to say this feels like an Elzar Mann moment, right?
Yeah, right. Just tapping into the emotion side of things, which wouldn't be uncommon, I guess, for characters of the High Republic era. But nonetheless, he does rage, and he walks in. That whole combat sequence, there's a form called Wing Chun, and it seemed like they were exercising some of that as they were fighting there. But man, Soul was really giving it to him, like just pulverizing him with his attacks, which I thought was great. So great choreography, great fighting sequence once again. Soul eventually kicks Kamir away, and then he kind of walks up. And this is, again, credit to the director on how they filmed all this. But that sequence where you suddenly see him and he like reaches, he's like still angry, reaches down, pulls up the lightsaber, ignites it. I'm like, oh my God, he's going in for the kill. And he was about to, looked like he was about to.
He was about to Avar Chris some Lorna D.
Yeah, with the hand, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Osha tells him to, screams out or whatever, and tells him to stop, kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know why she did that. I mean, I guess it's because you're better than this kind of thing. You shouldn't do this, but
yeah, and
you
don't want to see. I mean, when you see someone as good as Soul, you know that he wouldn't be able to come back from something like that.
Or it'd take a while.
It would haunt him. Yeah, I mean, and you talk about wanting to take barrage vows and all the other things that we saw the other characters doing. Now we'd have Soul in that very position. And I think Osha truly does care about Soul, right? And it's not about taking out the Sith. It's about still doing, following the Jedi way and still behaving in the right way so that you can follow the light and you don't have to. And we see this, like Temptation of the Force is doing a good job of this with Elzar Mann of helping him kind of reconcile and actually understanding his feelings and recognizing that the darkness was there, what he did and what to do with it in the future, right? And so I think those sequences, you don't want to have your characters don't want to have to go through some of that. And Osha's like the conscience for Soul in this moment of don't give in to hate, don't give in to that moment. You're better than this. Let's take him in. Let's truly get to the bottom of what's going on with the Sith. And you can't do it if he's dead.
I don't know. Elzar Mann cut somebody in half, and that's kind of where I go. That's
a rumor. I don't believe it.
How far are you into Temptation of the Force?
Like a third of the way through it.
Okay, I won't say anything then.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Oh, great.
Let's see.
More Elzar manslaughtering, apparently.
Right. Oh, so this is where Kamir says, "Oh, he's almost like singing it, right? This is your master." How did he know that? Did I miss something there? Did they establish that? Did he?
I don't know. Yeah, I got it. It may have just been written all over her face of like the care and calling him by name, not Master Soul, or and having that kind of effect where he would actually have the power to stop himself. I think he probably put all the pieces together pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the other explanation is he knows a lot more than he should know, right?
He definitely knows more than we know. That's for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
Look, I want to go back to Ippolito's comment here earlier. He said, might have mentioned already, but could Soul and Kamir be related, brothers, or maybe father and son? I think I threw this out there at the very beginning when we were talking about opening thoughts. I don't know that I said maybe master and apprentice could be related. I think they got a lot to explain if you've got a Jedi who is in the order and has a son. Maybe it's a little legitimate in some way. I don't know. I like the idea. It does feel like, again, we keep talking about there is some kind of connection here, right? Whether that's an actual physical connection through blood or relationship or just some kind of presence. They happen to be at the same place on Brendok when this horrible event happened. It's to be determined. I don't think we'll know. I think we'll know by series end for sure, but I wouldn't hate any of these theories. I just don't know they're going to have enough runway to get all that tied up and tell us within 3 more episodes remaining. What about you?
Yeah, that's usually where we end up going, right? Some of these things are just too complex to try to figure out and give you enough to where that came out of nowhere,
Right.
and then have no context, and then things end and wrap up. And that's not the story. I think that's the other part I come to, is just this part isn't the story. I don't know that I'm on board with the father-son aspect, because that seems like that's got a whole lot of stuff to it. And this era of Jedi, I mean, even with what's going on in the High Republic Phase 3 and stuff, it's still not common. It would be very, and it doesn't seem like a master like Soul is probably engaging in that type of thing, but we don't know. And again, that just opens a whole another can of worms that I don't think we're ready to explore. And I don't know that it's not as the Jedi world turns type of thing, and more the drama aspect. So, but the idea that somehow there is a relationship between the two, I think it is interesting, and they can do breadcrumbs for some of that and not necessarily have to explore it in this series, but at least leave it as an open-ended item while still closing out the main part of the story within the season.
You know who is out there later down the road making Force babies everywhere?
Who's that?
Rael Averross. You remember him?
Yeah,
Master and Apprentice.
Yeah, true. He is sowing his seeds quite.
He got a lot of kids
liberally
out there. A lot of Force babies out there. Thanks to that gentleman. But hey, if you know, you know. Let's see. On that same comment, he says, another comment says, the rage and attachment to Osha makes me feel like there's either a darkness in Soul's past or future. Yeah, I think that's probably true. He's probably suppressed it.
There's regret. There's grief. There's
yeah.
a lot of stuff there, right?
Yeah, it's deep, and we will get into it at some point here.
Yeah, if we can stop stunning him. Sorry. I get so pissed about that stuff.
That's kind of a segue here, honestly, because after he says, "Is this your master?" And he says to Osha, "You trust him even after everything he did to you." Mm-hmm. And then this is where Soul fires back and says his mind is twisted by darkness. And again, Kamir's retort, very stabby, says, "I have accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours?" So again, yeah, going back to that question, does he have some darkness in him? Are there some skeletons in his closet? Oh yeah, I think that was pretty much clear and evident at this point, and it's going to likely be either through the conversation with May, like aka Osha now, right, going into episode 6, or if we get the true sequence flashback in episode 7, we'll probably see exactly what that darkness is.
Yeah. I'm actually looking forward to those sequences. Like I said, I was a little nervous about some of that, but I think now, like Soul bearing his soul, sorry for the play on words, to May as Osha, and finding out if maybe there's somewhere that May can actually reconnect with Soul connect with Soul in some way is actually becoming really interesting to me, that they can actually help each other in some ways piece together what really happened on Brendock so many years ago.
Yeah. This is enough for Soul to be kind of creeped out at this point. I don't know if that's really the right word, but he's definitely backing off. I think he turns his lightsaber off.
Moment of realization, right?
Yeah.
That he is definitely going down a path that if he carries through and finishes and goes through with it, it's something he's probably not going to be able to come back from.
Right. And he turns off his lightsaber and says, "The Jedi do not attack the unarmed." And I'm thinking, I posted this on Twitter, but have you seen his biceps? Like, he is not unarmed. That guy is a lethal killer without a weapon in his hand. He just ripped the head off Yord with his biceps. So
yeah, the gun show follows him around.
Yeah. Right. He is the gun show. He goes on to say, rules, rules, rules. If you never follow them, you never have to break them. And he's looking at Osha.
Yeah. Such a great moment of almost enticing her he was trying to kill her early on too, though. So I don't know that he's trying to recruit her in any kind of way. And we'll talk about the end sequence too, to get your thoughts there. But
yeah. Well,
it was curious though, putting that doubt in her head.
I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours. I've got some other talking points around what that line potentially be. I'll table that and we'll bring it up on the Patreon show.
All right.
I think it probably fits better there. And this is where she kind of makes a decision. She says, "I love you, Pip," slaps Pip on the back of Kamir, and then the Umber Moths kind of take him away. I don't know. That sequence was kind of weird. I don't really, it's fine. I get from a narrative perspective why they did that. It felt a little clunky, but it's fine. It's fine for what we got. I get why they did that. But he says, she goes to Soul and she says, "Why did he say that? Why did he say I shouldn't trust you? What did you do?" And he says, "I'll explain later." And of course, we don't know if that's ever going to, I guess he's going to explain to the wrong person now at this point. He's going to explain
right.
To
Yeah.
me.
I'm not unreasonable by getting frustrated by that type of thing, am I? Shut up.
No.
Don't answer that question. Then.
No, you're not. I've said this so many times in the show, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing it, but I'm not the right person to ask. Like, I've watched a
Yeah,
lot of
true.
lost, and like this is just like normal behavior as far as I'm concerned. Like we're gonna set something up, but you're gonna have to wait another 3 weeks before we explain it, kind of thing, you know. But I don't know. I like that television. I think it's fun when it's done well.
I'm all right with it once, but not twice.
Yeah, it's kind of happened a lot here. All right, we kind of this is, and again, this is suspension of disbelief as far as I'm concerned. But like it's now daytime, and I'm thinking that fight took all night because the darkness fell when it started, and now it's now morning. So how much time has passed? I don't know. Maybe that thing has a really quick cycle. It's not like 24 hours like ours is. Maybe it's only like 1 hour. I don't know. But whatever. Either way, this is where Osha approaches May. I think she throws down the weapon that she has at that point. I think May does. And May says to Osha, she says, Osha, she seems pretty happy. And then Osha says, what did you do? She looks a little upset. She then talks about how, everything that she did for them. She did for the family. Osha says, no, you did this all for yourself kind of thing. You were selfish in a way. And she says those Jedi got what they deserved, which is what Jacob said up here earlier. He said the Jedi got what they deserve. So I'm assuming he's on Team Osha or Team May side. And then Osha says, well, they were more family to me than you were, which I thought was a pretty like deep cut, like kind of a slap in the face to her. And then May responds back, says, have you forgotten who we are, where we come from? They invaded our home. And you can see it on Osha's face, like, wait a minute, what are you talking about kind of thing? Like they're on two totally different pages throughout this conversation. Again, will be explained at some point, likely in episode 7. And then May questions whether or not they brainwashed her because she's regurgitating everything that, the Jedi have said. And now, based on what we know, it feels like, yeah, they came up with this falsified narrative about what really happened because they don't want to accept what happened or they want to cover it up. They don't want other people to know. And May knows the truth, and now she hears Osha regurgitating all this, and so her first thought is, "Holy crap! They got to you. You really don't understand what happened there. You have no concept. Like they've brainwashed you to say all this stuff, kind of thing." I guess your thoughts on what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the same battle, and we know we're going to get unleashed for us. And I think it wasn't until like the last comment there from May, where like the brainwashing comment, you're like, you know what? Yeah, maybe she's onto something here. Maybe we want to believe the Jedi because we believe they're good and they do all the right thing. But if you lie to yourself enough, you start to believe it, right? And you can't disseminate between what the reality of a situation was and how you have shaped it to be in your own interest and in your own way. And it happens to everybody in some way, right? But the Jedi have done this for 16 years, and she grew up in that methodology. She was already mad at May before she started a fire, or at least that small fire. And so all of the things that have gone to it, but again, you get this very just different headbutting, perspectives on all of it. It's just synonymous with the show, right? Of what's the actual truth, and two people thinking they saw something happen, but neither one of them might have actually the full version of what happened, and we've got to see how it plays out. But
yeah,
I think this was good though. I mean, it was good to be able to see them do it. I think also you still see the care though. May, embraces her and she's crying and she says that she loves her, and I think it's genuine, right? And even Osha embraces her somehow and has a tear. And I don't know how authentic the hug was. It looked like it was rather, at least a little bit of trepidation behind it, but still wanting to embrace and wanting to, connect with her sister. But, so I think there's still genuine care. And I think May genuinely wants to take care of Osha, but that's part of Osha's problem, is that May just wants to take care of her, but also that means make the rules. Who can wield the power? Who has the power? It's what the Jedi and Sith are fighting over, and it's what the sisters have always kind of combated a bit as well.
Yep. Yeah, she ends that little sequence there by saying they've turned you against me, and I thought, oh, it must be Obi-Wan's fault. And then she goes on to say, please choose me, please choose us. We both survived. All we have is each
that was a little heartbreaking. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. There was some good moments here, and it's difficult because you've got one actress trying to play two characters. And so some of that, you got to give it some leniency around the way it's cut and some of the way it's, it's blocked and that sort of thing. I get it. It's just part of it. But this is where May or Osha tries to arrest May. Like after all that was said and done, like I think she just kind of comes to her senses and says, we got to arrest you. And she tries to do that, of course. And May is telling her, look, the Jedi gave you a life without purpose, without love, without family. This is what I'm bringing to the table, kind of thing. She force pushes her back and knocks her, and she goes unconscious and says, you were never good at blocking, which is a callback to, I don't know, whatever it was, the first episode or second episode of the series.
Third episode, yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah, it was during the flashback. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
She cuts her hair off to kind of, look like Osha at this point. I didn't know what was going on when she light that lightsaber and she had her head over. I'm like, what is she going to do? Like, lob her head off kind of thing? We cut over to Kamir. He's kind of coming down. He did what he had to do to get rid of the Umber Moths or whatever. And then at the same time, we saw the head of Pip fall down, which Basil picks up and then runs off. Sol finally wakes up and he looks over to Osha and says, where's your sister? He says sister. He doesn't say where's May. So I don't know if we're not going to have time tonight to kind of talk about whether or not he suspects anything. I think right now he's a little too razzled to really kind of, understand if that really is Osha and not May. I've got questions around the birthmark on her head. Like, how are they going to get around that? Right. Is she able to suppress that in some way? Or is it just, she keeps, tilting her head so he can't see the marking, but I'm sure they thought that through. So we'll see where that goes. But she's like, hey, we need to get to the ship. She tells that to Sol. They end up leaving. A lot of people are upset that they left the bodies, but I'm like, they're going to come back for them. I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on right now. Like, they've got a killer that just killed a bunch of people on the run. They're not going to go tag and bag and tag everybody and, burn their bodies down. I mean, it's just not what they would do. Like, I get it. It feels like wrong that they would suddenly just leave the bodies behind, but put your head in the character's position. They're going after May, and they're probably going to try to find out where Kamir is, right? That's where their prime directive is right now.
Right. I mean, you think they'd call home too. So we'll have to see if they actually do that, because I think, again, some of the things people are concerned about is you'd at least have a team come out and check out.
Send somebody out here because
right.
Well, hell broke loose.
Right. Yeah. So what's going on there? And I get it. I mean, and Sol, to his credit, did look around and was devastated by it. But when they're back on the hillside going to the ship, they do seem rather resolved again and totally fine with leaving. So I had the same kind of reaction too. Like, they're really going to leave the bodies, and there doesn't appear to be anything. He's let it go, right? He's back to just kind of being an unfeeling Jedi from that respect, and they've got to move on. And it doesn't feel right, but we also know that the Jedi aren't that way. So we need to see if there's anything else to come after this to see if we can reconcile some of those feelings. I have a feeling they're probably just going to ignore it, but we'll see. Hopefully they do.
I think it's going to be this. I mean, we see Vernestra Rowe on that, what looks to be that same planet.
She does. Yeah.
It sounds like she is going to lead the task force. And I think, honestly, when she gets there and realizes, wow, this is like the Wow Bunch. If you've ever seen that movie, it's an old movie. Sorry, I'm old.
But what if there are no bodies left when she gets there?
Well, that'd be interesting too. Like, who swept them up?
Chimere got them all up. Takes care of it all.
Yeah. Either way, like, she's got a lot of blood on her hands at this point, and so this gives her all the motive and the reason to say, wow, I should have done more here. I did something wrong, and no one needs to know about this kind of thing, right? Or she tries to extinguish the whole thing and try to go after Kamir or something, right? That's all possible there. But we flip over to the last sequence here where Kamir is walking up on the dead bodies. He finds Osha's body there. Sounds like it looks like he force heals her in some way.
It looked like it, didn't it?
Right, because it kind of held his hand out.
I turned on the audio description, and it had no reference at all to healing her. It just said that he reached out, towards a cut and made a gesture, and then she rolled over.
Okay. So he could have revived her as well, or just brought her back from unconsciousness.
Maybe. But there was no confirmation any of it, but it certainly felt that way.
Yeah, I don't know. Force healing seems a little too much, just based on the Rise of Skywalker and kind of, the give and take of that. But reviving her is probably not out of the question. That may have all he have done there. But it could have. We do hear Kylo's theme play, by the way. Sorry, at this moment as well.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, and it could be a callback to like Tenebris, like some of the things that they ended up exploring with Plagueis later on about, bringing, saving people from death, bringing back to life, and those themes. So it might be a connecting thread to some of those themes in a very small way that's not necessarily dyad oriented like Kylo Ren and Rey had, or Ben and Rey had specifically.
Yeah. The last line he says as he's covering up Osha with the cloak and then places his hand on her, which I thought was an interesting gesture to do.
Yeah.
I suspect also, by the way, I think he knows who that is.
I think he knows too.
Yeah. Maybe not Soul, but I know this guy definitely does. But he says, "What extraordinary beings we are! Even in the revelation of our triumph, you see the depth of our despair." That sounds like luminous beings we are, not this crude matter kind of. It sounds like that's wisdom being spit out from the Sith kind of perspective, especially when they're using words like, during revelation of triumph, you see depth of despair, right? Tying into the emotions of stuff. Doesn't sound like something a Jedi would say. So I'm guessing that's something he learned either through a Sith holocron or so his teachings from his master, whatever it is. We're going to explore this more on the Patreon show, but the way I would summarize this from the EW articles, this really is just kind of saying, look, we're about to reset here. Everything that you've thought, everything that you know now is going to change going into these final 3 episodes. And that seems to be on par with what's happened here. But I don't know, anything else you want to add to the quote or anything else on that last sequence there?
I think maybe the only thing is like you see that the Sith feel triumphant in this area, right? They've killed the Jedi. They've actually held together pretty well. Like he's held together pretty well. Doesn't still have an apprentice, but held his own and actually did more than hold his own. But at the same time, you start to unravel all of the things that make the Sith who they are and why they hate the Jedi so much and why they want to seek revenge. But you're right. The article did make it much more clear, a little bit different from that, but a lot less literal than that we are about to go and say, all right, that was all kind of act 1. Now we're going to get to act 2 here to see what the rest of the story looks like and start to give you some of the answers that you've been building up questions to throughout the first 5 episodes.
There was one question in here. Is Chimera the apprentice? Would you prefer Sith Master to be someone we've met or a new character? This is from Zora Allens. I'll answer quickly. I want it to be someone new. Like I don't necessarily want it to be someone we've already seen already. But what about you?
Yeah, I want the Sith Master to be someone that we know from Legends, actually. But I want Chimera to be the apprentice because I think it would just make more sense. I think it would fit better. That's kind of where I'm at. And I think we had some others earlier in the chat that may have felt the same way as well.
Yeah, and this question got asked a few times, and I was trying to. There's so many more comments now that I'm not going to be able to go back and scroll up and hit them. But that was kind of the more.
You should try going through all of these live chat whenever we're looking for questions for Q&A because it does it in real time.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You got to watch the show.
You got to watch the whole show.
Oh wow. Let's see what else. There were some other questions that I had that I wanted to get to tonight. Let's see. Maybe we can just quick fire around these. And what does May hope to gain by taking Osha's place?
Away off that rock and away from her former master, I think is priority 1, right? Yeah. To get away. And I think also she will be able to enact her revenge on Soul. I think her mission is still intact, even if it's maybe not in service of Chimera. I think that is still in play. Yeah.
I'll answer the next question, which is what will Osha learn being in May's place? So the inverse of that. What is she going to learn? I think, unfortunately, she's going to learn an ugly truth, right? She's going to learn a lot about, I think Soul is finally going to be very honest and open about what exactly happened. And I think she's going to have a very different perspective on everything at this point. So, not Soul, but Chimera, right? Yeah. Osha's going to learn a lot from Chimera about what happened. He's going to be just spilling truth all day long because he has no reason to lie. Like, it seems like he is in the right. Now, how he's going about doing things and getting revenge, of course, is all wrong, morally wrong. But yeah, I mean, she's going to learn exactly what happened, and it's not going to be the story the Jedi painted. And I think he's going to leverage that. I think he's going to try to seduce her and use that to his advantage to get her to become the new Acolyte. I think we predicted this in the last 2 episodes ago, maybe, that there could be a role reversal heading our way here. And it feels like if this is a really horrible event that happened, and Osha feels like she's been manipulated and lied to and deceived by all her, quote, family and the people that she loved, that's probably enough to get her on board with, taking a spin with the dark side for a little while and see if maybe there's something better there for her. Yeah, it's very similar to Anakin's fall in that way, in some regard. Right. Not the same, but yes, sir, I get you. Similar in how they get there. Yeah. And of course, the last question was, do they switch allegiances? It seems like it's leading that way right now, at least. And I would say Osha probably more likely than May. Yeah. I think May will maybe come back from the edge of where she's at, but I think she's going to be like, you all suck. and I don't want anything to do with any of you. You're all problems. And this is like, I believe in what the Coven had stand, what my mothers were saying, that
all of you are bad actors, and none of this stuff is right for us. And this is why we were better in exile than we were being in the middle of all this mess.
I want her to come around
like that.
Yeah,
I do too.
It's
I
just
want her
hard
to
to
have
get
perspective. Yeah. I want her to have perspective and to be able to at least recognize it and acknowledge it. But I think at the end of the day, she's probably like, I get that. I don't hate that. I just hate everything around me because none of this, I just don't want to be in the middle of all this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And I miss what we had, and our family did not operate like you two warring factions do. Neither one of you are any good.
Last question here. I think May is trying to get evidence that the Jedi is bad in order to convince Osha on her side. Primary purpose of going with Sol for sure to avoid getting worded by Khmer, though for sure, or getting K-worded. Killed? By Khmer.
Oh, maybe so. Yeah.
So, it's a very interesting plot, and I think we're going into technically, I guess, Act 3 at this point of the series, and
yeah, true.
And I do wonder too, like if they're going to let off the accelerator a little bit on the pacing. It feels like we just went through a lot.
Yeah.
But according to the article, it sounds like she's not letting up. So we've got that sequence that was in the trailer or the teasers where they're kind of, there seems to be some kind of a chase and they're going through that asteroid or debris field or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does feel like we do have some pretty big action sequences, but man, we're running out of footage. There was a lot that was covered in this one. So there's not much left to kind of discuss, but hopefully it doesn't slow up. I don't expect it to. It sounds like she is going to just run through walls at this point to get the story across, and I'm looking forward to it. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. And
just to Ryland's point, I think May's objective and May's interest is still solely on Osha and rebuilding her family. I think that's where her allegiances have not changed at all, and that's where they truly are. Even if they soften on the Jedi, everybody else can go away. It's all about Osha and how does she get her sister truly back and convince her to be with her. I think she will still try and keep trying for that because that's really all she has left in the galaxy. So
yeah,
I think that's where it goes.
She said that she was trying. I mean, to be fair, also she was trying to kill Sol, and now she's paired up with Sol. But you have to remember, I've seen people say this too. Like, why doesn't she just kill him the first opportunity? Well, because she knows that she doesn't have to anymore, right? Her sister, she wanted to kill Sol because she thought her sister was dead. Her sister's alive, so therefore she no longer has that motive. She doesn't necessarily like the Jedi. She hates what they did, to your point, right? And she definitely she's on the side of her sister, but she's not going to go about, she's not trying to infiltrate the ranks to suddenly take out Sol and the rest of the Jedi Council or any of that stuff. That is not what the motive is at this point. And if you got there, go back and watch the episodes because, again, not to be pretentious, but that's not at all where this series is going.
And we'll see if that takes a turn one way or the other, right? I mean, it could still, but right now her desire is to get off planet. And yeah, she could strike him or try to strike him down. But that didn't really go well the first time. So I think doing this, it's less threatening. It's an easy way right now. He seems to be fooled, so go with it. And of course, we've got Basil in the background sniffing around, so he's definitely going to root her out here sooner rather than later. Yeah, he's already on to something doesn't smell right, quite literally.
Yep. You know what does smell right?
Our amazing Patreon members and all the people in the live stream. So thank you everyone for your continued support over on cantinacast.com/Patreon. We had a whole lot of people out in the live chat. Thank you all so much for coming out. If I miss anybody, my sincerest apology. This is not intentional, but I'm going to read through all of the amazing folks we had here. cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to this and would like to join the chat, get your questions up on screen. Make sure you leave us a reply to the video, like and subscribe so that you can win an Acolyte poster that Albert will send you directly from the movie theater that we're giving away here. So a special thanks to Risk Bayless, Music Train, Reader Reborn, Alex, Sky, One vs. CP, Raphael, Danny, Gary, Stephanie, Zeralins, Hard Countered, Dante, Anthony, Echo Base Network, Ippolito, Andrew, Jacob. Again, if I missed anybody, sincerest apologies. We see all the other folks in the background. We had a great turnout tonight. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Thanks for all the likes and the comments on the previous videos too. It really does mean a lot to us. We're glad you're enjoying the content, and we're happy to have you here, and we appreciate your comments. You're on mute.
Dang it. No, at least I know it's at the end. Don't forget, if you're a Patreon member, if you're even at the $2 point, $2 will get you the audio for the character dissection that we're going to do with Khmer this Sunday. We'll also address any questions that we didn't get to tonight, anything that comes up between now and then. So tune into that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's a very deep character, a lot of different layers now. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about and speculate. We'll lean a lot on this article too. There's some stuff that we didn't even cover tonight that came out about the character itself. And yeah, please bring your tinfoil hats because, you never know with us. We could get into some really kind of crazy, wild speculation.
So I'm going to keep it right here next to me just so it's easily accessible.
Yeah. All right, Jonesy, any final comments before we get out of here?
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it.
All right, guys. We'll see you all on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.